no, there's no council action today. And oh, here we go. Sorry. Good evening. This is Council Member Adams. There is no council action tonight, and the purpose of the study session is information sharing and for the council to provide staff input on the facilities investment strategy and the recreation center scenarios. This item is scheduled for 2 hours. We will start with a 30-minute staff presentation. It is a bit lengthy due to the complexity of the topic, as you can imagine, but we really want to make sure that we have an informed discussion. Our request is, and really the purpose, and my request as your facilitator, my fellow council members, is to receive feedback on the questions, and if you can actually hold your questions until the presentation is complete, that would be wonderful. And then we will open for clarifying questions. And before we dive into more meaningful feedback. And excuse me, when we're done with those questions, we will watch the time and manage feedback to ensure that we can get through everything and ensure that each council member has time to respond. Given that, we will provide responses to the questions shared by staff in advance and pasted into the chat for your ease. So let's see. Is there more that I have to do here? I feel like, should I go right in or do I pause now? Or do I do the council questions first? Or do I pause now and open it for our first presentation, which will be on the facilities investment strategy?
Nope. First, we're doing Boulder Arts Blueprint.
I'm just going by this little thing here. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Our bad then. Our bad then.
No, it's mine.
Sorry, council member.
Mine. It's mine. My bad. Actually, I love that we're starting with the arts in mind so we can get our creative juices flowing for the conversation that we're going to have on facilities investments, where our creativity will be absolutely critical. So I will turn it over to our incredible arts and culture staff, or Noria.
Thank you so much. I love how you wove that creativity in there, council member. I saw that. Council, as you heard, our first item today is indeed an update on the Boulder Arts Blueprint, a truly exciting document. I think that sets a shared vision for arts and culture citywide in alignment with our existing citywide strategic documents. What's really exceptional to me about this document is how much community engagement and voices went into this document to help shape how we feel about arts and culture generally. I hope you'll see that reflected in the blueprint on how much our community have appreciate and rely on the arts as connector, as soul nourisher, as healer, as innovator, as thought provoker, and as you have seen in our new approach to arts and culture, as economic driver. So I'm thankful to all in our community, including the Arts Commission, who took part in shaping this. But selfishly, I will call out our amazing staff who worked hard to bring this amazing body of work to you today, which I am excited to know that my own mom, who has been an artist, both personally and professional, is watching. Hola, mommy. So with that, I will turn it over to Lauren Click, who will get us rolling.
Hi, good evening, all. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lauren Click. I manage the Office of Arts and Culture within the City of Boulder Office of Cultural and Economic Development. Boulder's creative sector is a defining strength of our community and a key driver of economic vitality. The city is ranked among the top 10 most arts vibrant, medium-sized communities in the US over and over again, with creative employment 3 times higher than the national average. Boulder County has the nation's 3rd highest concentration of artists per capita, and some of whom are on this call with us today. In 2022, the nonprofit arts and culture sector generated $115 million in economic activity locally. With the arrival of Sundance Film Festival, that opportunity is only growing. The future of Boulder's creative sector is your future too. By the end of this talk tonight about our new cultural plan, the Boulder Arts Blueprint, you'll know where Boulder's creative community is headed for the next decade and how you can share about it and participate in it and support it. Since we began this project in 2024, I will do a very quick overview of the project and the process, and we will end with goals and questions for your insights. But first, a thank you from us too. Thank you so much to our consultants, to the Arts Commission, our advisory committee, staff, city leadership, and all of our community members. Your questions for council tonight. These are questions we ask that you keep in mind as I talk through things. So does council have any questions regarding the vision for the arts, big ideas, the 7-goal framework? Does council support the implementation approach? And are there any specific strategies or initiatives council would like us to prioritize? So, what is the Boulder Arts Blueprint? This is a roadmap for the city and the community for the next 10 years. This connects a vision for the arts citywide to practical tools, including policy, funding approaches, programs, and partnerships. And through this presentation, I'll walk you through the process and the vision and each of these 7 goals and the strategies that are going to help us get to those goals. The Arts Blueprint is very intentionally aligned with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan update. The update sets policy and the blueprint is strategy. Together, those plans reflect a shared understanding that arts and culture are not standalone amenities, but are absolutely essential civic infrastructure. As you know, the SARE framework sets the city's generational goals. You'll see these goals in the Arts Blueprint reworked into their connections with the arts. So how the arts can support the city's long-term goals and how those goals support our creative community. For example, the SARE goals are now integrated into the grant program, creating a line directly from the work of our arts grantees all the way to the community's broader established goals. We also have an extensive set of guiding documents that have been integrated. As Nuria mentioned, this plan builds on a lot of listening and learning. We looked at what's happening in Boulder and across the country, learning from other creative cities and national best practices. And it is all grounded in local real data, like from our artist census, venue study, and reports from our grantees and other local research. We estimate that we reached nearly 2,000 community members with our engagement. Nearly 1,200 people completed the community questionnaire. We held conversations, one-on-one interviews. We met people where they were, like at Bike to Work Day and at rec centers and Boulder Arts Week. For example, this focus group at Yoga Pearl with contemplative artists. The Boulder Arts Commission approved the Arts Blueprint on March 25th with some recommended adjustments to the organization of the full document. Our vision for the arts, creative expression, is at the core of Boulder. This is based on the foundations, the community conversations, the research. That's how this vision was developed. The vision summarizes our community's possibility and potential for arts, culture, and creative endeavors. The big ideas are some themes that are woven through this work. Our 7 goals. The blueprint is formatted into 7 goals. I'm going to walk through each of these goals one at a time, and the actions listed with each goal are just some of the examples of the ways that we already work towards these goals and some potential new ways that we can work towards them over the next 10 years. Part of our job in this office is to figure out what we can afford, what we have capacity for, and what will be the most effective. Also, I do want to note in the context of your full meeting discussion this evening that a lot of this work is funded through the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Tax, the 1% for art policy. Some is done in partnership with our colleagues, our excellent colleagues in other departments of the city, and our partners now citywide. We also intend to open an arts fund that's similar to the Play Foundation to help with independent fundraising, and are also now involved in redevelopment projects where there's more potential for independent funding. Goal number 1, accessibility and inclusion. This goal is about making arts and culture accessible to everyone in Boulder. This means that we will continue programs in neighborhoods, access to our $2 million grant program, continue to translate the grant program. We've already added a bedrock category in 2026 to encourage collaboration, accessibility, sustainability. And we'll partner with our OCED colleagues on creative use of commercial spaces in new development. Goal 2, entrepreneurship and workforce. This goal is about supporting Boulder's artists, creative workforce, and entrepreneurs. We want to make sure that creative careers are sustainable, where artists and makers can earn a living wage and build successful businesses. So we will continue professional development grants, continue research, continue the business of the arts programs with the Boulder County Arts Alliance. This year, we will roll out collaborations with our new colleagues in the Small Business Development Center and support creative micropreneurs, and with the Community Foundation to support some back of house services. Goal 3, reputation and identity. This goal is about celebrating arts and culture as part of our reputation and our identity. We will work to keep that alive through marketing campaigns like Boulder Arts Week and broadening our partners and starting a Poet Laureate program. Public art and public space. This goal focuses on expanding public art and creative expression across Boulder's public spaces. This means continuing our 1% for Art policy and partnership on citywide projects and events. For new programs, potential new programs, that could include partnering with developers to expand the 1% for Art program and encouraging creative meanwhile uses like murals or temporary installations during construction. 3 more. Goal number 5, nonprofits and institutions. This goal focuses on strengthening Boulder's nonprofits and cultural institutions. We will continue our impact by funding and promoting their work, continuing research, and gathering our leaders. We look forward to being more involved in encouraging cultural and creative work through economic development projects and adaptive reuse projects. Goal number 6, experimentation and innovation. This goal is about encouraging experimentation and innovation in Boulder's creative community. We will continue to support artists who are pushing boundaries through our Experiments in Public Art series and low barrier grants and sponsorships. We will continue to make the grant program more accessible. For example, this year we have expanded first come, first serve grants from 10% new grantees last year up to 80% new grantees for the program this year. Finally, scenes and affinities. This goal is about recognizing and nurturing Boulder's creative scenes, the organic communities that form around shared interests. We will continue to support organizations of all sizes and encourage gathering and work to help those spaces and networks thrive by supporting the nighttime economy, reviewing policies, exploring temporary project-based space rental, and more. Finally, before I open it back up to you for discussion, a few quick slides to help us translate this vision for the arts and all of this work into how we hope Boulder will be in 10 years. If you are an artist, we'll work for you to have more opportunities, stronger networks, and a recognized voice at the heart of our ecosystem. If you're a business, we will work so you have more opportunities, more connections, more foot traffic, a livelier community, and more arts and culture as a tool for talent attraction. If you're a nonprofit administrator, we'll work for you to have more stable resources, stronger partnerships, and more visibility. And finally, for all of us, more creativity around town, more affordable events, and a welcoming, inclusive, economically thriving creative city. I will put the questions back up here for council. Thank you all. And I will put up very briefly our image credits as a good steward of images.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation and just a Herculean effort to ensure that level of depth of community feedback and engagement. I look forward to our council member feedback on the questions that you have provided and put in the chat box that I don't see yet, but I hope to soon.
They are coming soon. Thank you.
Oh. Sorry, okay, let me just go back to the other one. Am I not looking in the right place?
Hold on one second, please. Sorry.
There they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Does council have questions or feedback regarding the arts blueprint vision for the arts, big ideas, and the 7-goal framework? Are we taking them all? Oh, right, that's my choice. Okay, yeah, we'll start with questions. Questions around the blueprint arts, the big ideas, and the 7-goal framework. I see Tina.
All right. Thank you so much for the presentation. We've been waiting for this for a while. I had just one really high level question. There's a lot of new ideas and a lot of new activities as well that are suggested in this blueprint. And I'm wondering if we anticipate more a need for more staff or if and if the artists themselves will continue to get the same amount of money arts groups and other direct art investment, or will we anticipate more staffing?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you for the question. One of the things I think we need to take into account as we work on all of these priorities over the next 10 years are funding resources, staff capacity, the opportunities that arise with partnerships outside of our office, which is a big movement for this blueprint in particular. As far as funding goes for our artists, we did increase, well, the grant program moved to $2 million this year. And all of the grant categories increased. We did sort of an inflation increase because the amount for each grant hadn't increased since 2020 or before. So I think if you're an artist applying to the grant program, then you would be receiving more funding, and nonprofits too. You'll be receiving more funding through the grant program. Do you want to say anything else, Mark, about staffing?
Yeah, I mean, staffing. Good evening, Council. Mark Wolf, Assistant City Manager. I think Lauren covered it well in her presentation that, we hope that this is not only aspirational as a document, but a way to leverage existing city funds out in community in different and new ways, including trying to attract private investment in different areas. That certainly is investment we hope goes to artists and local organizations. Our individual staffing levels is something we always look at. I think we feel like we're in pretty good shape now, and also recognize that the demand on staff across the board, both arts and culture staff and in general, is always high. But we feel good about our current work plan and excited about some of the near-term opportunities in our collaboration across our new Office of Cultural and Economic Development.
Okay. And then my other question is, again, high level. I love the idea of art everywhere, but I am concerned about vibrancy of hubs. Are we balancing those two ideas, both from a funding perspective and just being realistic about the size of our city?
Sure. And just to clarify, do you mean in terms of the community hubs and others that we're calling out in our comp plan draft?
Yes, and also similarly, the institutions I think there was some good language about investing in higher impact efforts, but then trying to balance all of this. And it's really more just to set expectations with the community. Like, what will the level of art be throughout the community versus concentrated in some other areas?
That makes sense. Lauren, do you want to pick up on the institutions piece?
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. Sadly, we cannot have art everywhere, though. I would see it as like a 50-year vision, right? I think. And we have this year, the two things it makes me think of. This year, we have expanded this bedrock category of giving additional funding to organizations that are acting as bedrocks and working on collaboration. Those are nonprofits, but there are institutions that are doing a lot of work in the community around collaboration with smaller entities, accessibility, sustainability. And funding those entities to help fund the rest of the creative economy, right? And those like smaller organizations. The other piece is that we do, through public art and through our Creative Neighborhoods program, fund projects specifically in neighborhoods. And we very specifically try to do one in each sub community every year, every 2 years, to make sure that we're like sharing where things are happening. And we used the racial equity plan last year when we were not able to get into the racial equity tool, excuse me. When we were not able to get into different neighborhoods, we took that program back through the racial equity tool. And then the next round of applications, now they're going to be in all of the neighborhoods that we did not have applications from before. So I think we have a couple ways that we're trying to work towards making art accessible as close as possible to your home. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Rob.
Thank you, Taisha. Let me lower my hand. Lauren, thank you so much. Following the blueprint, I was inspired to do the self-guided tour, and I learned the names of so many pieces of art that I didn't know around Boulder, like one of my favorites, the 55 degree. I never knew what that was called. But anyway, my question to you, the micropreneurs, as you call them, the artists, and you and I had a brief conversation about this one time. I'm curious how the back of the house services would work and who would provide those services for them.
That's a great question. Thank you. So we have 2 programs this year that we're already in discussions with. One would be to support a creative business cohort with our new colleagues at the Small Business Development Center, now that we're integrated in this Office of Cultural and Economic Development. So that would be helping individual creative artists or creatives, artists form their own businesses. There's a lot of work that the Small Business Development Center does that really directly overlaps with artists as businesses. So there's that work. Separately, we call it back of house services, but think of HR, marketing, your taxes, your bookkeeping, right? There's a lot of this work that we found that in our research, a lot of organizations were saying, we need help with this. And we think there's an opportunity for us to get together all of these nonprofits and get them started on helping find some resources for that. So we've actually been in discussion with the Community Foundation to roll out a grant over the summer, a collaborative grant. And that grant will fund like sort of a startup for helping with back of house services. So let's say that you have a marketing company in Boulder, you could like work with some nonprofits, not just arts and culture nonprofits that are connected to the Community Foundation, right? Health nonprofits, housing, that you could start marketing for all of these entities together. All of those nonprofits pay an amount every month, and then they get marketing services. They get bookkeeping services, right? So how do we plug into our broader nonprofit community to help everybody get the support that they need so they can do what they're good at? They're artistic directors, right? They want to create, they want to make things, they want to showcase and dance. So let's try to help them do that primarily.
Thank you.
All I want to
Any
do
other
too.
questions,
I need
Rob?
those services. No, thank you.
All right. Thank you kindly. Nicole.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Lauren. My question, is just around the funding for some of this work. So since 2A is tied to sales tax revenues, and that money is a big driver of implementation for a lot of the goals that are laid out here. Can you speak a little bit to how the goals might adjust in years when our sales tax revenues are down or they're not keeping up with inflation?
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate that question very, very much now that our arts community is tied to a tax in some ways. So as most of our funding, outgoing funding is going to the grant program. So it's a $2 million grant program. And in different ways, we're able to adjust that. And we would, because we have so much research from the community, we'd be able to reflect where we think we should move in and move out, right? And we would probably still go back out and ask people like, where do you think we should sort of pull in and tighten? Where could we expand in upcoming future years if that's the case? But it's also the idea behind the Arts and Culture Fund to be able to seek independent funding to support our grant programs, Boulder Arts Week, like all of the other programs that we manage, to try to have some external funding that is not necessarily dependent upon a tax. And, we'll see how successful we are, but we'll try my best to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And up next is Matt.
Thank you. Appreciate the work that's gone into this. I know it's a long time coming. It certainly is the timing's well. It follows the two-way ballot measure where people are clamoring for what that investment brings. A word that came up then and I think is mentioned twice in the blueprint, and I want to circle to it, ask a couple questions, is the word transformative. So I think that's really what people are like aiming for and clamoring for, is that transformative shift in investment. And so my question comes around, how does this blueprint, because I didn't really see it, but I see permitting improvements mentioned. How do we deal with the adaptability to be able to pivot rapidly to a transformative project if we don't have the resources to plan long term, but there's an opportunity for one to come quickly through a public-private partnership? How are we set up to more rapidly grab that opportunity and make sure that we can make that reality? And so I'm just sort of curious how in the blueprint we're going to maintain that adaptability to be ready to grab those transformative projects and see them come to reality.
That's a great question. Thank you. Do you have something in mind, by the way? Are you seeding something that we can?
Well, I mean, there's stuff floating around the community, but there's no secret, obviously the creative campus that BMOCA is actively working on. There's opportunities like that. There's a few other floating around where they're looking at viability, but at the end of the day, if it's not us driving the whole thing, how are we structured to be able to rapidly see those opportunities and pounce on them? And more importantly, maybe have resources standing by to then be able to pivot into those. Because the worst thing we could do, I guess, would be to see a project and not be able to pounce on it because we don't have skin in the game. And then it, floats on by. So that's what I'm sort of curious about, is how are we planning to have the resources stocked up, but the ability to pivot to those?
I might jump in on that, Lauren.
Sure.
I think it's a good question, council member. There's been some good examples recently of, I think, the city really leaning into those opportunities. You mentioned the NOBO example with BMOCA's campus. There's some city support behind that. Certainly we had to be creative and pivot from a zoning and land use standpoint on that particular project. We've been active partners in a proposal on Pearl Street in the Boulder Junction area, and also exploring opportunities on the East Bookend, which Arts and Culture will most certainly be an anchor there as well. I think in each of those are taking a lot of time. They're different complexity of projects for sure, and there's always a time horizon associated with those. But I think what's really an opportunity with emphasizing culture as a part of our economic development efforts is really being able to be more nimble and move faster in these areas and have tools in place that can help even incentivize some of the things we want to see from an arts and culture standpoint across all parts of the city. So I think there's some really good examples that we can point to, and we're always looking at how can we make these go faster? How can we be more proactive as a city? How can we get them in different areas? So I think we recognize the opportunity.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Ryan.
Thank you, Lauren, for this great presentation. I have a question about the way that Sundance and the Blueprint work together. And I guess it's really two questions. So one is, what are the ways in which we hope Sundance will strengthen the work of this Blueprint? And then on the other side of it, are there any concerns or risks that Sundance brings to it, which we should be thoughtful about? For example, I'm just thinking one example would be maybe local artists finding that they're now competing for more resources or something along those lines.
Yeah, great question. I'm surprised it took us this long to get to the Sundance question. So, I think Sundance Film Festival and Sundance Institute are an incredible catalyst for all of this work. And it's going to bring increased visibility for all of our community, including our artists, new, younger audiences. Boulder is an aging community, so it's going to bring back some of our audiences, bring in new audiences, bring in international audiences, and actually have a few things that are already in the works that are exciting and ways that I can see it positively growing, like the all boats rising. And then I do have some thoughts about challenges. But so far, we have seen already investments in venues, renovation of venues. Those are going to be available for year-round use, and venues and affordability of venues and use of venues has been a conversation that we heard all the way through the blueprint, right? Having Sundance Institute in town year-round, that is an entire new workforce of creatives coming into town, right? Improved connectivity with CU. Already CU is talking about how to make it easier to get around on their campus. They're making it easier to reserve spaces. That's like something new that I think came out of those discussions, right? The Film Commission hosting their schmoozers. If you get to go with them, they're super fun. Create Boulder has been hosting talks to connect the local arts community with Sundance very specifically about programming. We're working, talking to Visit Boulder about a storytelling campaign specifically about the arts community. So when people are in town, they see what is here and they can come back to visit our arts and culture community. And then finally, we've been discussing how to work on commercial vacancies while Sundance Film Festival is happening, right? To have artists, our local creative community, showcased very front and center in that time, right? And all that being said, the risks and some of the concerns, really a lot of the research that we saw, it was actually before Sundance Film Festival coming to Boulder was announced. So a lot of the risks and the concerns were things that were in progress either way. So artists facing financial strain, facing having a hard time with venues and infrastructure, finding spaces to create, finding spaces to rehearse and dance. And then just the financial strain of being an artist in Boulder. That's just to say, the blueprint was already pointing in this direction of how we help support and build infrastructure, how we build funding pathways and resources and opportunities and support local artists. And I think Sundance Film Festival gives us this catalyst opportunity to like use these this like people coming into town, this international audience, right? This huge opportunity of people that are artists and creatives themselves to come and show off what we have here. Is that?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I had a question about, Terry, you got anything on this round before I just want to make sure? Thank you, babe. Okay. So I love it. I love the general direction. These are more like little tweaks and things. Curious why goal number 6 around experiential and innovation couldn't be like a cross-cutting theme. I feel I don't want to go into comments yet, but it's giving lots of goals. And so I was just curious if, if there's could potentially be some interweaving. So I was just curious why you all decided to make that a separate goal and not try and embed it into one of the existing goals.
That's a great question. And it has been a very interesting discussion. I think, or I know that things that came out of research and discussion with the community is that there's a very particular interest in experimentation and innovation and calling that out as something particular to Boulder and something we need to focus on. And that's why it's its own individual goal. Experiments in public art, but also making it easier for artists, like emerging artists, to have access to funding.
Right. So that's already
yeah. Right. It's certainly, these are all like
it's giving cross-cutting theme, but
yeah.
I'll give that in comments then. But
yeah.
that was just a general question that I had.
I love it.
The other is around Where is the baseline data?
Oh, sure.
Like
It's
I
in,
see data points around,
yes.
but like where I just going, and this can also bleed in the comments, but I just had a hard time finding where I love the KPI section, but then there wasn't like a baseline section that
Mhm.
let me know where we are over the last few years. And particularly when I talked to the arts community members from different segments, a theme that came up was just being able to have those quantified numbers more and just, to be able to quantify that. So, and it also will help with the prioritization as well.
Oh, sure. So
Is it in the
we
bottom?
rolled this out in multiple phases. And so the first phase in the discovery report has a lot of data in it. It has a lot of the
Yeah,
comparative data, our
I'm
peer
sure it does.
cities. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, I don't need
Oh,
all of that data, but I do need data that's specific to the KPIs that you're recommending to determine
oh.
what
Mhm.
the stretch would be. So that's what I was asking. I'm not suggesting it doesn't exist. I was saying it's not in this document that is stating goals and making recommendations. And this is the place that I would need to know where I don't need to know all of those things, but I just was curious if I missed it in this document. And that'll be a comment that I have later.
Thank
So that's
you.
fine.
Yes.
And when you were talking about the recommendation for the buildings having, oh, sorry, this is a crosswalk with the facilities conversation. But I'm noticing some potential tension between supporting nonprofits, but then also asking nonprofits for those that are maybe leasing a building from the city to pay more of the costs. So I'm seeing a tension between the two plans there. Maybe somebody from facilities can come from the facilities conversation can come on to just nuance that little section there. Basically, one of the recommendations of the facility plan was to have the leased buildings owners, sorry, the buildings that the city owns that are leased for those leasees to cover more of the maintenance costs and operational costs. So on the one hand, they're going to see an increase here, but on the other hand, there is this additional support for back of the house. So I was just wondering, are the two shops talking to each other in that conversation?
I'm happy to take that one, council member. It's a fair observation. There, and many of our plans are some kind of competing goals and values. I think there is value in providing more affordable space for our cultural institutions. And at the same time, we've had many tenants that have enjoyed a dollar lease, essentially kind of free space. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's probably something in the middle. I think
Okay.
our recent work with the Dairy Center is a good example of that, of being able to provide affordable space and a path for ownership and sustainability for both the city and for our nonprofit organizations. And so it's in that spirit that we hope to work with all of our nonprofits that are in city spaces going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Those are all my questions. We will go ahead and move on to the next. Thank you so much, Lauren, for those responses as well. Um, the next question is, does council support the implementation approach to advance the arts blueprint priorities aligning with the broader city goals? Oh, I like that. Okay, we got some thumbs up. Okay, we got another one. All right, this is a direction thing too. Like, do you feel good about this direction? Do you feel good about this approach? I will say, all right, I'm coming back. Anybody have anything? Okay. I will say, going back to the baseline data and the prioritization, I feel like there's just too much. And so I am supportive of the approach, but I am concerned about how much it is. And this goes back to Tina's comment around capacity and if additional staffing and just the realities of we just had 3 wildfires in not that long of a succession. So I think where I'm feeling like it's not necessarily missing the moment is just how the poly crisis that we are facing right now, and that prioritization is more than just our councilmates saying what we want to see, but it really should be responsive of the data and what the data is saying. And that's where I was going back to those KPIs. It's really hard for me. There's very long lists. And I love all of those approaches, but I do have concerns around the staff capacity, current cat staff capacity to do it. And then even just in light of the poly crisis that I mentioned before. I also just feel like the arts community might need to be doing a lot of work around climate grief and just grief in general. And you know what I mean? I just going back to what Councilmember Benjamin said around just the ability to adapt to the moment. You know, I think of the Marshall Fire and how the community rallied so powerfully, and the arts community were central to that. And so if we have our tentacles in too many places, I've been watching a lot of octopus films, then you know, I just have some general concerns around that. So I would say like more like this, like I am supportive, but I would love to just see, and I don't know, like, you know, in this, if this is the iteration that's final, I saw that it was printed out. But again, I just have concerns around, and as somebody who has done facilitation since of strategic planning since 1995, that you know, for me, when I see a plan, I'm thinking that there's goals, there's measures, there's metrics, there's reporting frequency, there's right, and I'm not seeing that in this plan, and that's the part that makes it hard to put it, you know, to really advocate for funds going where they need to go, because we don't have that data as strongly as we do in our climate action plan or the housing or transportation. And so that's where I feel like there's a real opportunity so that we're held accountable to what these things said. And when there's too many, I feel like it'll be very easy. Like, oh, well, and that's why we have a 2A in the first place. So, anywho, that's all I have to say on that. But if there are council priorities, because that's all I have to say on that. If there are council priorities, is there any need to respond to that or thoughts on that? I want to, Lauren, any responses to that? I saw you, you know, visually giving responses, but I want to hold space for you and the team, or Mark quickly.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to that is we have kind of an appendix, if you will, of guiding staff's work that we left out of kind of the body of the plan. Monitoring our progress, reporting on our progress is really important to us, and we'll take your comments
I was gonna say,
to heart.
Thank you. I mean, if it's not in the plan that the public receives, then how do we hold it? You can't hold yourself accountable. That's not how that works. So we need to make sure that we're very transparent about that. Ryan, I see your hand, darling. Bring it in.
Thank you. Lauren, just wanted to pick up on your articulate analysis about Sundance, and the list of opportunities is impressive and exciting. And so I just, wanted to maybe follow the logical extension of the, the potential concerns and risk side, which is our local artists are counting on us to look out for them and make sure that the economy works for them, and the process isn't disruptive in ways that are overly burdensome in ways that we're not expecting. So just maybe to state the obvious, but would hope that we'd give some attention to ongoing look at that and response, and coming back to council if you think it's necessary. But just having an eye on that. That's it. Thank you.
I see Mayor Brockett.
Thanks, Taisha. So I just wanted to, just wanted to give a big thank you to Lauren and the team. This is truly extraordinary work that you've put together here, and I love this phenomenal arts blueprint, and it gives us a great roadmap for the years to come. Very fitting that it's during Boulder Arts Week. Perfect. And loved your clicks picks. Thanks for sharing those with us. And in terms of prioritization, I think the city staff, I leave it to you all to figure out what the most impactful things are to begin with. I have every confidence in your ability to do that work. So I'm not going to try to give guidance on the priorities, but just to say that you all are doing truly extraordinary work, as befits a city like Boulder with such a thriving creative scene. So really appreciate everything you're doing.
Any other priorities or strategies or initiatives before I close it out? All right, bringing it home. time to caboose. Oh, no, Nicole, bring it in.
Yeah, sorry, I was waiting for that last question.
Oh,
I just wanted to say thank you. No, it's totally fine. I think I just lost track of which one we were on. But I really don't have anything that I would like you to kind of change. I don't really think it's on us to be telling you what specific priorities and things should be in here. What I love about this plan is really how it's building flexibility and adaptability, which is something that I think we just need across all levels right now. But we've got clear goals. We're partnering them with some flexible and realistic implementation plans. We are taking into account piloting, learning, scaling. All of that feels like the right approach in this kind of tumultuous time where there's a lot of change on the horizon. We don't quite know what it looks like yet. So just kudos. I think this is bringing in all the frameworks that I think are important here in the city. Our equity framework, our SER goals as sustainability, equity, resilience, alignment, and really bringing in community voice too into all these goals. So I just kudos. It's wonderful work. I don't want to mess this up by trying to be prescriptive. Just go forward. Thank you.
All right. Any other hands from my colleagues? All right, then I will close this out in caboosing. So, as I mentioned, all in all, I'm just a huge fan as an artist and educator and all of the things. It's just been beautiful to watch and to participate where appropriate. I will say I love I concur with my council member Shuhard on prioritizing artists and so that they can afford to live here. And I'm sorry, I don't agree with my colleagues that do whatever you all are great and yeah, you are, but I'm not here to just co-sign. We don't co-sign the budget when that comes up. We don't co-sign the transportation. We interact, we give thought and guidance because that's our responsibility as far as oversight is concerned. So again, but I also honor that everybody has different expertise and strategic planning happens to be one of mine. And so I love the arts. And as I mentioned before, because we get plans like this that have lots of beautiful things, but aren't really rooted and grounded in the successes that we've had in the past. It doesn't talk about any of the challenges that you were able to overcome to be able to, and you have. And so like that's where I want our arts piece to be at our plans to be as rigorous and meaningful and measurable as all of the other plans that we have. And so that's where I think that the opportunity lies. But still, I go back to, and when I talk about prioritization, the ability, I've seen again and again in the data, in anecdotals, et cetera, that artists cannot afford to live here, that the trickle down theory of giving monies into institutions and nonprofits are not trickling down to the artists the ways that it needs them for them to make a living wage. And that is just the reality of the situation. And so, and I'm not suggesting that the institutions and the nonprofits are, they have overhead and they have operational costs. And so really, I think when I think about prioritization, I would rather us partner with organizations like you mentioned, Boulder County Foundation, but there is also social venture partners. And I was waiting to hear their name. These are a group of nonprofits that are accountants and lawyers and all of the things that artists need. I mean, if anything, we could be funding them and then taking off because that was another comment from the QA crowd supporters, which was there's too much money going to admin. Well, when we're trying to facilitate a ton of programs and do all of this work, then that's where our admin money goes. So that's where I would think I would like to prioritize that. And then the other thing that I didn't see, and again, my apologies if it's another document somewhere else, but defending our artists and their intellectual property. Right now, there is an all-out assault on their intellectual property. And so I would like to make sure that we are prioritizing that. And again, funding the legal pieces that cost a lot of money and just doing what we can in our contracting outside. And similarly with the entrepreneurial, I would love to see more partnership with our business chamber and with the development and housing communities, because y'all do a great job on our public spaces, but it is those private spaces. And I will never forget when Edwin over at Zomama at our, remember Tina, at our micro business meeting, where he said, yeah, he was talking to the art woman, Anna Art Gallery. And he was like, I would hang your stuff in my thing. And so when I went into his thing to eat my lunch, I saw other people's art there for sale. These are low-hanging fruit, easy peasy lemon squeezy. And so these are the kinds of opportunities, going back to how do we support artists and how do we support our nonprofit communities in ways, because they're all struggling right now. And that's the other piece, going back to the data. Like, there's nothing in there about the fact that our federal arts funding has been stripped, that our nonprofits are struggling right now. And so that goes back to that prioritization, and that's really driving my concern. It is not, can you do amazing things? I have no doubt about that. It is, are you going to stretch yourself so thin that you and your team can't get the work that you need to get done? And that is really what my biggest concern. But at the aggregate, I'm just so excited. And this work is so critical for this very, very chaotic moment. Oh, and then I end with venues. I like to see more climate benefit in this. Like, how are we benefiting the climate in what we're doing here? And you mentioned venues, and I was at the MEMS capstone for that CU Climate Week. A couple of you were there, Mayor, I saw you, and Brian. Um, but they had a whole project. They were working with the Boulder Theater and the Fox Theater to reduce their mission goals and the waste and reduce waste. And I just thought, again, that's another bigger piece that I would love to see, that interplay across the climate initiatives, energy, and our utilities, and what y'all are doing. All right, that's all I have. And boom, it wasn't even the whole hour. All right. Well, thank you so much, as my colleagues and myself, just really honored to be able to be on y'all's team. And as I said, um, again, I think the prioritization will also come when it's budget time. And so having that data there, to support and to honor the work and the impacts that this has, will be critical. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much from my staff and my colleagues. Thank you.
Tremendous job. Tremendous job. Oh, and thank you for all the community members, the over 2,000 community members who helped to inform it, right? I mean, that's why we owe you. And that's why we're going to be accountable to you to make sure that this comes to fruition. So thank you. All right, moving on to the next topic. Spoiler alert, it's going to be amazing. And it's going to be on facilities investment strategy.
Thank you, council member. I'm excited that you think it's going to be amazing. Here we go. Our second item, as you mentioned, is around our facilities investment strategy. And Michelle, I apologize because I'm about to do a little intro and I didn't run it by you. So who knows what I'm going to say.
All right.
I just want to say, so I'll start with this, right? I know this topic not only has a lot of interest from community, but it is on the minds of many communities as well. I was just earlier this morning at the Local Government Hispanic Networks Conference in Westminster, and there was a panel talking about budgets, and all we were hearing about is this common thread of cities being understaffed and underfunding and having so many unmet needs. And I just felt like I was having an internal staff meeting as we're thinking about that. We are no exception to that nationwide program, sort of crisis. And I want to lift up the really hard and dedicated work our professional staff has put in over the past years to truly understand the depth of need that we have and look towards pathways forward, right? You'll hear a lot more tonight as we think about You'll hear a lot more about that tonight as we think it's important to understand how we got here, what considerations we're looking at now as we look sort of more future facing. We know that we did not get here overnight. And what I've really appreciated about our recent journey is the critical steps we have taken to get to this place, to have a more holistic conversation. And it's really amazing when I consider that our facilities and fleet department sort of came into being in 2020 as a whole department. We had our first facilities plan in 2021, where our entire buildings portfolio came together as one. And we now have a better handle on how to move forward with two key objectives on that plan. Sort of maintaining what we already have. And I know many of you have been talking about that with us, talking to community about that. But the other thing that we're also making sure that we consider is something that we consider for most every other thing, and perhaps had not been on the horizon in the past when we were talking about facilities, which is total cost of ownership. That includes ongoing operations and maintenance into the future. That is all of our buildings will continue to have that as we move forward. And that is what we're grappling with as we think about perhaps how that wasn't always accounted for in the past. We've also heard a lot of misconceptions around this topic across community. We too believe that recreation in South Boulder is important, as it is across the entire city. We don't want you or community to feel like we need to make one choice that potentially impacts one department against another choice that could impact a different department. It has been our practice to speak about our entire building portfolio as something we need to address strategically for one main reason. They are all important to our entire community and our organization. Whether it's the public safety building, our rec centers, our fire stations, or even the municipal building, which hosts our council meetings, they serve us all in different ways, and we need them to be healthy places for all who work or visit here to feel welcome. We hope that this important work helps us create a legacy for the future, but we have no illusions that we will resolve our issues overnight, because it took decades to find ourselves in the place that we are. Your guidance will help us, though, think about both immediate next steps, as well as those that will need to be taken into the future, and will also help shape the upcoming discussion on potential ballot issues or initiatives that could get us closer to addressing some of the issues that we're facing today. Finally, I'll say out loud that I understand how passionate our community is about these issues, and perhaps about individual beloved community spaces. Sometimes that passion can sound like criticism of staff's professionalism or expertise. I hope as we continue to have these very hard discussions that we remember that our entire staff are dedicated to serve their community and are working tremendously hard to address critical issues that are long overdue and that are just presenting us all with some difficult choices. With that, Michelle, I will send it over to you.
Thank you, Nuria, and good evening, Council. It is a pleasure to be here. I am Michelle Crane. I serve as your Deputy Director in Facilities and Fleet, and I'm excited to share with you information and really take your questions and have a good conversation. So let me get a presentation up here. There we go. Can everyone see that? I actually can't see other participants though.
Yeah, we're just seeing the, now
okay.
we're seeing it, yep.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go ahead. Sorry, I can't see other people. So if someone raises their hand, maybe they can let us know.
I think we're just gonna run through it first, Michelle, and then we'll take the slides down.
Yeah, okay, great. So our facilities investment strategy. So I'm going to start with our study session agenda for this evening. We want to go through and explain a little bit of the process and talk about connecting these conversations with other important funding conversations we're having this year. Share a little bit of the story of how we got here. Describe some current conditions in our citywide buildings, and getting into a little bit more of both our urgent minimum investment needs and then some of our longer term investment needs. And then we'll focus on our recreation centers, and then lastly, bring it back to our buildings citywide and identify a path forward. So first, connecting these conversations with other important funding ones that are being had this year. In March, you discussed the long-term financial strategy and some ballot measures. Tonight, we'll talk about our city facilities and some needed funding for them with a specific focus on our recreation centers. The purpose of this meeting is to inform you on the state of our facilities and get some high-level feedback from you to help inform how we develop scenarios to bring back for future conversations. In May, you'll receive a financial forecast and discuss what you'd like polled, and we'll bring back scenarios for capital projects that include funding options that could be generated through different ballot measures. In June, those results will be brought back to inform final tax ballot ordinances. So buildings throughout time have shaped the character of our communities. We spend most of our lives inside buildings. Our municipal buildings are a direct reflection of our city's values. They are also incredibly expensive to build, and they should last a very long time when we build them. which comes at an even higher cost of over their lifetime, that total cost of ownership that Nuria just spoke of. We have to consider the lasting impacts of what we build, so this demands that we balance our financial prudence with our altruistic goals. And we practice good governance. It is building quality buildings with a plan to care for them as we hand them off to our next generation. So I'd like to take you on a quick little journey. We started here in a small city hall on 14th Street that everybody worked out of. By the 1950s, we were expanding and built our current municipal building. This photo on the upper left is the original west facade before we added the police in 1962. We also started expanding our fire stations, and some 50 buildings were added to our portfolio by the turn of the millennium. By 2020, we have more than 75 buildings, nearly 2 million square feet of space, representing more than $500 million in current replacement value. The average age of our buildings is about 50 years old, with more than half of them built prior to the 1970s. And at this point in 2020, the colors that you see represented, they represent all kinds of different types of buildings, from fire stations to rec centers, utilities plants, office buildings, maintenance shops. And at this point, they're all being managed separately and funded differently by each department that they serve. This created a rather uneven approach to investment in buildings, and up to this point. It was also a challenge for the council at the time, who were being asked or being presented with very expensive building investment needs coming through individual department plans. They really had no way of balancing these big funding requests against each other. We also had in 2016 some new climate goals that were setting aggressive targets for facilities. And around this time, we had done a number of engagements conducted with staff in the community that were starting to point out kind of some of the unwelcoming nature of some of our buildings and some poor workplace environments. And lastly, around this time, we had done some asset reviews, which was kind of a first as well. And it acknowledged and identified a large backlog of deferred maintenance. So that started showing up around that time on our city's unfunded list. All these factors were coming together at this time, and they were really creating a boiling point for our city buildings. This led to the very needed development of our first facilities plan. It addressed this need to look holistically across our entire building portfolio and through one lens of good building asset management. This plan remains today our North Star, and it's a guiding document for our facilities. The 3 pillars reflect our values and closely align with our sustainability, equity, and resilience framework. The plan also incorporates the Boulder Valley Comp Plan and other department plans as they relate to our city buildings. And 2 key initiatives, again, Nuria spoke of, define our actions that we should take moving forward with buildings. So maintain well, it is the foundational goal, which is in essence a gift to our future selves. And consolidation, which at its very heart was about and is about reuniting services and staff that had become scattered across the city since those very early days. And it does result in efficiency and some effectiveness. There was also recognition that a more centralized approach to building management would be more effective. So hence the Facilities and Fleet Department was created in 2020. This is a shift that takes time though. Facilities that serve different departments are now starting to come under this plan, under this one roof. And as one city, we work with each department to build and maintain buildings that serve the needs of our community. We are collaborating as partners together to solve these big challenges in our city buildings. But we've also inherited a building portfolio that is generally not in very good shape. As our 2021 facilities plan predicted this trajectory, shown in this graph, what you see in general is the condition of our entire building portfolio. In 2021, it was in poor condition or starting to be in poor condition in that orange color. And by 2030 is predicted to be critical in crossing into that condition. We are still on that path. Our current annual funding for existing buildings is just not adequate to change the course. And change is made even harder as emergencies in our buildings are increasing. Our buildings are still declining faster than our reinvestment in them. We're taking a pretty good bite out of this problem with consolidation to the new Western City campus. We'll consolidate staff from 11 different buildings. We are moving out of more square footage than we are moving into, and we are reuniting all of our city departments under this one roof. We are removing more than $20 million in near-term unfunded liability from the buildings we're getting out of. And this enables other city plans and goals that have been stalled for years, like in the civic area, to proceed. By advancing work in the civic area, we should be able to generate some revenue from the sale of buildings, but furthermore, re-energize this area and entice new investment. But we're not out of these buildings yet. Our building portfolio and the current challenges we find ourselves in grew over the last 100 years. We've been working on solutions to this situation we find ourselves in for less than 5. And again, in the midst of mostly reacting to emergencies in our buildings first. In the development of our facilities plan, we worked with consultants who help communities around the world tackle these challenges because we are not alone. Many of the recommendations and insights from the facilities plan reflect what is working elsewhere. But it's still not an easy problem to solve anywhere. It's multifaceted and complex, and it will not shift overnight. We are working to develop options and help weigh trade-offs, and in some cases, hard decisions are going to need to be made. This next phase of work, which is a companion to our facilities plan, is a facilities investment strategy. We are at the beginning of this work as a formal strategy to bring forward. What we are bringing tonight are some essential pieces of the strategy to help inform larger budget conversations. This strategy is a building roadmap over a 20-year time horizon. It is, practically speaking, for us, a field guide for our department to make good decisions every day when emergencies arise, to try and avoid missed opportunities or making sunk costs that we will not realize long-term returns on. By painting a long-term vision for where we want to head with our city buildings, we can make informed strategic investments in the near term when things break. So across 75 buildings of all different types, needs, ages, conditions, funding sources, this is a pretty large challenge. So we've taken a crack at this by breaking it down into some manageable categories to tackle in next steps. So here's the list of categories, and I'm going to go through them quickly now for the sake of time, but we do plan to continue to bring these back as we evolve in different categories. So 11 of our buildings are being vacated by moving to the Western City campus. Again, each is a unique case, but generally speaking, we're divesting from these buildings since we will be leaving them. We have 7 parking structures. There is an investment plan, but also unfolding policy around how they're going to be owned and managed, so we'll continue to develop this as we go. There are 4 very large utilities buildings, really buildings, utility sites. We are working with our utilities department on investment needs in these buildings. There is dedicated funding source for these buildings, so investments would be managed within those funds. 12 new buildings. These are buildings that our facilities plan defined as new, recently built or heavily invested in within the last 15 years, and they should be receiving 2% of their current replacement value to plan for their future infrastructure replacement needs. Currently, only 2 of those 14 have budgeted that funding, so we really need to take a harder look at how to increase that to avoid being in the same place we are today with these buildings in the future. 13 leased buildings, several of which, but not all, are leased for $1 per year. We cannot fund needed investments in these buildings, and they generally present a liability from a building perspective. They provide a social value, so we understand we need to weigh this as we consider our leased building portfolio. There are 18 maintenance shops. These buildings are generally small, but they also require investment, and they could be opportunities to consolidate some in the future, which also might present other kinds of future opportunities. And lastly, we have 15 buildings we are calling our priority buildings. They are, in short, the buildings that keep our team up at night. They are the focus of the efforts right now in our conversation tonight. These are the buildings we have prioritized for investment. They all provide vital services to our community and are crucial in supporting the delivery of services that fulfill goals and objectives across all areas of our sustainability, equity, and resilience framework. They are not insignificant in cost when we think about modernizing them and meeting goals. And they are all in decline. We are chasing emergency repairs across all of them to keep them fully operational. These are just a few data points that are demonstrating this. On the left is our maintenance service request volume. These 5 buildings over the last 3 years have made up almost half of all of our service requests. And then on the right, this is how we've spent our 2025 emergency capital maintenance funding. So you'll notice the public safety building stands out in both these sets. We also used our key performance indicators that we identified in our facilities plan. We reassessed these priority buildings, and while some limited investments have helped some of the buildings hold steady, others have continued to slip, like our recreation centers. Our public safety building remains where it was in 2021 at the bottom of the list as our building in worst condition. We need to make minimum infrastructure investments in the next 6 years over this next CIP period just to keep these buildings operating. This is more than just maintenance. This is to make immediate, larger infrastructure repairs and replacements to things like you see in these photos, to repair lots of old pipes that are breaking, which are causing damage to floors and joists like what you see in the lower left. We need to replace equipment that is failing in many locations. Even if we choose to proceed with a major renovation or replacement project for one of these buildings, it takes at least 5 years before we actually move into that building. Current equipment and systems in many cases will not make it that long. And knowing when we plan to build or new or fully renovate a building can help us make good near-term decisions on how to fix our current buildings and limit investments. Across our buildings are many basic repairs, like in spaces like these, that need to be made. Our current maintenance dollars are not enough to cover all these repairs. So across those 15 priority buildings, the cost to cover the next 5 to 6 years to address the kinds of minimum repairs I just showed in the photos, at the low end is about $20 million. We also have a high-end potential funding needed identified. The low end is what we know needs to be repaired or replaced. So specific pieces of equipment that we've identified we know is due for replacement. That high end is the possibility that when we replace a piece of equipment in an old building, it can cause a chain reaction of a lot of other things needing to be fixed or replaced. And I have lots of examples of where a small repair that we went in to make resulted in the replacement of an entire system. So that high end is to alert to those potential needs. We try to limit those as much as possible. So again, to show this even more clearly, we have a minimum 20 million total known repair and replacement need across these 15 buildings. There are 3 large capital projects already programmed in our current budget. There's Fire Station 2 and Fire Station 4 building replacements and the extensive renovation at the East Boulder Community Center. These projects were identified a few years ago because they are buildings in the most critical condition. And if we advance these projects, as we intend to, we save $10 million from this number in minimum investment needed, as those projects will take care of those capital needs. It is critical that they move forward so we don't exacerbate this situation. So this really leaves just $10 million to fund in major maintenance in these remaining 12 buildings. So we would propose funding this using existing CCRS funds. We would propose spreading out projects and funding across the CIP period, so it's roughly $2 million a year. This brings us to our first staff recommendation to prioritize funding in minimum capital infrastructure needs across all these buildings with currently available funds. We will bring back specific projects as part of the 2027 budget development, and it will be shown in the facilities and fleet capital major maintenance CIP. So now shifting to look at the much larger capital projects at each of these buildings that reflect either significant renovations, additions, or full replacements of these buildings. This is a rough order of magnitude on cost. Across these 15 buildings, this is roughly in the order of $500 million, of which $400 million is unfunded. These projects that modernize buildings generally achieve goals of the facilities plan and citywide goals. This means they have modern, energy-efficient infrastructure and systems. But it also means that they meet modern standards for how different departments deliver services. Accomplishing this will take decades. We will not replace these buildings over time easily, all at once. This is what we're working to build a path for and make headway on over the next 20 years through our investment strategy. For this type of investment, I'm just going to spend a couple of slides showing what modernizing means. So first, basic to every building is restrooms, and in many of our buildings, we have showers and locker rooms. So designing for universal design standards is a new norm and a growing expectation in our city buildings. These spaces in our current city buildings, shown on the left, are a far stretch from those standards of things that we're seeing more towards the right. These are examples of modern public safety buildings from around the country. The rough cost that we've identified envisions something like this. Currently, we are protecting evidence with plastic sheets from old and potentially failing water pipes above. Our reception area for victims of crime to walk through is less than inviting or comforting, is contrasted with modern spaces for public safety buildings like those you see on the right. In a fleet building, on the left you see is our current crowded conditions at our current fleet building, and on the right are examples of recently built fleet services buildings that are laid out and organized to support modern service delivery standards. For public works, on the left are images of our current maintenance workshops, and on the right are examples of modernized public works buildings. These are what we envision for our future and are generally what is reflected in those capital costs we are sharing. And now we're going to take a deeper dive much more into the recreation centers. And for this, I'm going to turn it over to Allie Rhodes.
Good evening, folks. I am Allie Rhodes and serve as Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Boulder. I want to start with repeating a little bit what Nuria shared earlier at City Council, at the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meetings, and in our facilities. We have been hearing a lot about the importance of our rec centers. We have been listening carefully to every public comment and reading every email. And I want to start by just repeating again what Nuria said, that the city values our recreation centers. We aspire to be a healthy and socially thriving community, and our public rec centers are critical to being a community where every community member's health and well-being is built on high-quality parks and facilities. Our facilities are important hubs for neighboring, for connecting, for physical and mental well-being, and on our darker days for safe gathering. We have been listening carefully to folks' stories as they share about how important the rec centers are, and we agree. We know there are a lot of deep connections to our facilities, and we feel the same way. In addition to our feelings, the research is clear. Rec centers contribute to community health and well-being, to economic vitality, to quality of life, and more. And our conversations are not intended to negate these truths. They are intended to couple them with the reality that these important buildings are aging, and we must plan for investing in them, and we must be responsible stewards of community resources. Our facilities require significant investment to maintain, and they require funding every single year to operate and to maintain in service to the community. And so our conversations are also grounded in facts. And we're going to start this section with Michelle providing a brief overview of the current state of each center.
Thanks, Allie. So starting with our South Boulder Recreation Center and looking at its current state. It was greatly improved last year after we invested $2 million in the facility, making many repairs like you see on the right-hand side of the slide. This building is still a priority, but no longer at the top of our list for the risk of imminent failures like many of the others. And this gives us time to better plan for its future on that roadmap we're building. And I just want to address the ability to reuse this building, which has come up. We have investigated this. We always look first at how we can reuse a building before suggesting it needs replacement. And we have successfully reused many buildings and learned a lot from that. For this building, it would require an addition. It is not large enough to meet current code requirements and maintain adequate program space within the existing walls. The form and the structure of this building make an addition complicated and costly very quickly when compared to building a new, more straightforward building form. We can provide more services and amenities that would be possible for a comparable cost if we renovate this existing building. All the options we're going to propose for South consider a brand new building. Now, as we look at the current state of the East Boulder Community Center, this building has never seen a major renovation, and we urgently need to make repairs and equipment replacements. This building comes in second for demanding our attention with calls to fix things that are failing. We have failing air handling units that have caused program spaces to be closed. We need a new roof, pool filters, and windows, among many, many other things. This building is now one of our biggest concerns in keeping us up regularly at night. The major renovation project that is very much needed was funded in the 2024 budget. Through our community engagement and early design work, we've identified a need for additional funding to realize a preferred scope of work. While conversations this spring will help inform the feasibility of a final scope, we are advancing with a first phase that will go into construction in 2027 to address immediate infrastructure needs. In this phase, we will fully renovate the east wing that houses our age well services, so we do not have to disrupt those services again in the second phase of work. Our North Boulder Recreation Center also requires pressing infrastructure repairs, including a building enclosure and pool replastering to ensure continued operations. Walls in the pool area have moisture in them, which causes concrete blocks to break off on the building outside when it goes through freeze-thaw cycles. Every year, we conduct a structural assessment to ensure no imminent risk, and at the moment, we're fine, but we do know these walls will need to be replaced. We also have many basic equipment replacements, like mentioned at the other centers. And I'm going to turn it back to Allie to go through some of our scenarios.
Yeah, I'll start by sharing that we recognize we have 3 recreation centers and they operate as a system, with each serving as an important community well-being hub while providing an opportunity to serve the whole city. We use the Gymnastics Center at North as the best example of this. That program serves over 1,000 young people a week from all over the city and supporting the overall vibrancy and viability of the facility. And so when the investment at East was approved with the 2024 budget, we launched the Indoor Recreation Needs Assessment, codenamed Future of Recreation. The intent of the Future of Recreation in the near term was to inform the East investment with a system-wide look, and in the long term to allow for planning for North and South, just like we're doing now. The project included condition assessments for each building, research on levels of service and benchmarking, and thoughtful community engagement. There were 4 windows of engagement in all, and the process was designed using the racial equity instrument. We had focus groups and representation from some of our historically marginalized communities, including the disability community, for whom our recreation centers are often their only location for health and well-being. In that engagement, the community identified amenities to be at all or multiple locations and opportunities for individual centers. When the community is asked what amenities were most important across the system, they said lap lanes, gyms, larger cardio and strength spaces, and improved spaces for children were most important. As an example, the North Boulder Recreation Center weight room is just 3,000 square feet. We've tried to address growing demand for body weight exercises, for strength and movement by decommissioning and repurposing a dance studio, but it just isn't enough. The community also identified opportunities at specific locations, such as better improving the warm water pool at East and spaces for older adults. At South, we heard a lot about expanding and improving fitness spaces and improving its ability to serve as a community gathering space for all ages. And at North, folks really just said, this is great. Can you just make it bigger? And for some of those key areas. And so with the next slide, you'll just see a list. We want to be clear, the current system is not providing everything the community would like to see or as much as they would like to see of it. And this is a list of some of the things the community would like to see. From aquatics training space to indoor field space to an indoor track, there are many amenities our current system does not provide. Next slide. And so to advance the conversation, we have developed scenarios for each facility. And I want to first acknowledge there's the no investment scenario, which is our current trajectory for the North Boulder Recreation Center and South. In this scenario, service levels continue to decline while we spend significant funding on reactive maintenance. We do not recommend that scenario, and we are glad we are having these overdue and important conversations. And so onto the scenarios, we have prepared 2 for each building. They provide a rough outline of what could happen. However, there is a lot of room for decision-making and design. Both scenarios result in more modern buildings that are more accessible to the community that meet current life safety and energy code. For each facility, scenario A reflects a lower level of investment that sustains the building and its ability to maintain current service levels. It addresses the modernization that Michelle just described. In this scenario, our buildings are electrified to reduce reliance on non-renewable energy. And we do want to call out the cost to electrify these large buildings, and especially pools, is significant. Like labs, they are energy intensive. In this scenario, we also improve universal access. And in scenario A, we'll call out, we do see reductions in levels of service for aquatics at both east and south. We've also outlined a scenario B for each building that, in addition to aligning with modern life safety, accessibility, and energy codes, reflects investments addressing unmet needs, setting us up to better serve the community today and into the future. We want to highlight you will see wide ranges of costs for these scenarios. These rough numbers and wide ranges reflect where we are in planning. Square footage, amenities are yet to be determined. So let's talk about scenario A. And I want to introduce the South scenario with just two important comments. One, I want to reiterate decisions have not been made. Again, today I saw something that said staff want a field house and they've decided on a field house. And folks, that just isn't true. There are design decisions to come, and they will involve the community. And so I'm hoping we can focus on the real conversations before us. And I'll call out that scenario A does include a South Boulder Recreation Center without a pool. And we know our community loves to swim. We see higher levels of participation and demand than most benchmark communities. And anytime we ask the community, and including with this planning effort, we hear a desire for pools. The cost to operate and maintain pools is the most significant cost driver in an indoor recreation facility. The current South Boulder Rec Center is home to the smallest lap pool in our system at 6 lanes. If we cannot commit to increasing funding for recreation, we have offered a scenario where there is no pool at a future South Boulder Rec Center. Scenario at East reflects that given space needed to meet code, the level of service for aquatics is reduced as there is only currently funding to renovate one of the bodies of water. We would likely recommend the warm water pool given our aging demographics and the many populations a warm water exercise pool can support, from older adults to swim lessons for surgery recovery and more. North Boulder Rec Center in scenario A really builds on what works, making it last for years to come while better serving the community. So scenario B. In these scenarios, we capture the opportunity to meet future needs while we're making these significant investments. We set ourselves up to serve the community for decades to come. South Boulder Recreation Center is a vibrant modern community hub that includes a pool and a gymnasium. East Boulder Community Center would see similar improvements and improved ability to provide warm water recreation. And at North, through a 15,000 square foot addition, we can co-locate age-well services at this site. This allows for intergenerational programming, which serves and benefits all ages, and the city's ability to decommission a building in awful condition and capture the opportunity to sell. For the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board conversation last week, we created 3 options of investment, each considering the system. Our preference would be option 1, which is scenario B for all 3 recreation centers. This would allow us to respond to community feedback, improve levels of service while preparing for population growth, demographic changes, and more. This was also the feedback from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. This scenario advances our social goals and supports real improvements in building condition and performance. And the cost to modernize the facilities and set them up for the future is significant and largely unfunded. Similarly, the gap to maintain buildings in good condition and to provide recreation services is real. This scenario is dependent on our ability to fund, which is our next step. And so in short, we have a clear understanding of what the community wants. The next most important questions are, what do we want our levels of service to be? How will we prioritize? And what will we afford? And these questions must be asked in consideration of the citywide needs, not only for buildings, for operations. Just in Parks and Recreation, we also have unfunded needs to support park maintenance, play area refurbishment, and more. So back to Michelle to wrap this up.
So we have narrowed 75 buildings in need of investment down to these 15 and identified them as a priority. 3 of which absolutely are our recreation centers. So tonight we are asking for your feedback and your priorities so we can further refine options and a mix of investments across these buildings. Our goal, like has been said, is to support investments in all of these buildings over time. So this is our second staff recommendation, and based on your feedback, we will take the next steps and develop investment scenarios across these buildings. There are many financial levers that we can pull, and we know it might not be enough in total, but it is a key part and a key next step to layer in the different funding strategies over time. And so we're going to start looking at this just with our CCRS fund, and I'm going to let Charlotte just say a few things about that.
Good evening, council members. I'm Charlotte Husky, budget officer for the city of Boulder. Good to be with you here this evening. As brought forward to city council last October, our current 6-year CIP spanning from 2026 to 2031 in the CCRS, or Community Cultural Resilience and Safety Tax Fund, assumes a total of $73 million in debt issuance to support 3 capital projects, those listed here, including the East Boulder Community Center, Fire Station 2, and Civic Area Project. We are thankful to Boulder voters who approved the permanent extension of CCRS last November. And as we were sharing forward as part of this ballot measure planning process, with this permanent extension, we now have additional funding and financing capacity to consider within the CCRS fund. We recognize, however, that this is a multi-year approach, as Michelle has spoken to earlier in the presentation. And with our existing backlog of facilities, infrastructure, and maintenance, we still require additional capacity. And so we are considering tax ballot measures that we will be bringing forward to City Council on May 14th, as well as continuing to look at trade-offs within the existing budget for this capacity. We will continue analyzing these tax measures and bring forward scenarios of options to City Council for council discussion on May 14th.
So this is just a quick kind of reminder of just exactly what Charlotte was talking about. Again, we're here early at April 9th talking about our city facilities funding needs, and then do plan to bring back scenarios along with additional discussions at the May 14th meeting, and then continue on with these additional steps looking at these ballot measures. So I'm just going to put back up here. These are the 2 staff recommendations that we are making tonight. Again, the first recommending prioritizing funding of minimal capital infrastructure needs with currently available funds. And our second, based on council feedback here tonight, staff will develop investment scenarios across a mix of priority buildings, again, to be brought back as part of our continued discussions on budget. And so our last slide here is our key council questions for the evening. So we do want to ask if council has any questions on what was presented on both the facilities investment strategy and our recreation center scenarios. Our second question, does council agree with staff's recommendation to prioritize investment in minimum infrastructure needs first with currently available funding? And our third question, does council agree with staff's proposed next steps to further develop a mix of investment scenarios across priority buildings, including our recreation centers, and options based on perhaps feedback? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take down these, and I think these questions will go into the chat. Oops. Stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Michelle, you wouldn't mind popping those questions into the chat box? That was quite another Herculean effort in putting those pieces together. Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Ali, for all of the incredible, intense research and reporting that you did to inform this conversation. So to our first question, does council have any questions on what was presented in both the facilities investment strategy and the recreation center scenarios? And I see Tara followed by Rob. Tara.
Okay, let me just get out my notes. Okay, so first thing is sometimes our SCR framework objectives, I think, are at odds with each other. For instance, we talk about environmentally sustainable, which sometimes can clash with financial stewardship or an economically vital. So my first question to staff, I have like 3 questions. My first question to staff is, as an example, Allie mentioned, for instance, a pool that's electrified being much more expensive than a regular pool or a hybrid pool, for instance. With our finances in dire straits, let's say, how do you make a decision how much to push one SCR framework, one pillar versus another pillar? Or can we as a community say, because I want to get the most for my money, can we push the financially, can we make sure that we're being financially vital, or can we be good stewards of our finances? So that's question number 1.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a great question, and it is one that we grapple with. So it is true, depending, and like a lot of these scenarios, every building's different, every project is different. I will say electrification in a brand new building is not as significant and is not the same kind of costs as it is in a renovation project. And so those are 2 different factors that we have to weigh depending on whether we're talking about a new building or another or a renovation building. I think the other thing that really has to be considered, and we do weigh over time, is that total cost of ownership. And so when we look at energy efficiency and how we operate buildings and the upfront costs of putting energy systems in a building over then looking at the total cost of what those systems may save, that's part of our calculus. But I think that those detailed costs and what the actual difference is worth the consideration, looking at those differences. Those are things that we can evaluate and bring back. I will say, typically though, after we provide an energy efficient building, which is a lower total cost of ownership, sometimes that difference between electrification is rather negligible. So I think, but it's an opportunity to look at where we want to save and how we want to balance goals.
Well, I don't think it is negligible though with the pool. Allie, is it?
That's part of the analysis that come back with Michelle, because to the whole 50-year analysis and what it saves operationally and whether it's a new building or a renovation, it's not a simple answer. I think we'd love to bring it back.
Okay, so for further discussion. Okay, my next question is retrofitting versus a new build. So why would we, if let's say that retrofitting was more expensive than a new build, why would we do a retrofit? Just for fun? Just kidding.
No, they're complicated. The reason we retrofit and we reuse buildings is because there is a tremendous amount of preserved embodied carbon. And so it really comes down to reusing buildings. And it's something that we have heard in facilities in particular, as we've developed a lot of projects, is the interest in reusing buildings and the preservation of embodied carbon. And I feel that there's probably a voice missing in the room to truly quantify that, but it is significant. And so that is really why we do look at reusing buildings and not just demoing every building as we look to build new. There are some buildings that are easier to reuse than others. Building new is easier. Is it the best thing? I think that is where we look at it in a case by case. How much of an existing building can we truly reuse versus how much we just have to take apart because it's hard to reuse and then you don't have much left over versus, what we can get from a new building. So again, it's case by case, but the bottom line is it is a preservation of embodied carbon, which is significant.
I hear you. What's going around the community is how much money we spent on the Alpine Balsam parking garage, saving it. But we'll leave that for comments later. Okay, my next question is, when we have to make a decision often we say that we won an award for a building. We have fire station, the new fire station example, most beautiful fire station ever, for sure. But how do we decide, giving the money that we have, which is not a lot, whether we have to make the best building ever or we can just make something really good or just good enough? I mean, what goes into those decisions?
Yeah, that's also a great question. And some of them, we get this, a lot. We have good looking buildings. The cost of that compared to what just the cost is to build the structure itself. Again, we're not talking about a lot of additional cost to make these good looking buildings. It is largely our buildings are driven by our code requirements. In the case of Fire Station 3, our form-based code drove most of the exterior design decisions. And so a lot of what we find is we're regulated into, and I don't want to pit that. Many of our codes, most of our codes are good. There's a reason.
No, I appreciate you saying this.
But that is really, we're driven by codes into a vast amount of this. And so there really is little to skim off the top. If we could even find that. And
I mean, I love a beautiful building, so I'm asking what the community is asking.
Yeah.
But I guess the last question I have, maybe for staff, is I think I talked about this at the retreat. Is there any way for us to find out where we're not getting our, I don't want to use the term rate of return or anything like that, but where our codes or form-based code or our environmental codes are so stringent that we're paying so much more in certain areas and not getting the rate of return on, how the cost of the building versus how much it's costing to meet all of these codes. Because we're in a different time period right now. It's called the time of we don't have any money. And so how do we make these decisions? And is it possible, and I mean this as a question, not rhetorically, to look at those codes and to say, you know what, this one just isn't worth the amount of money that it's costing us?
Yeah, it's fair. Buildings cost a tremendous amount. I don't think we're going to find a lot in extra codes. And for one, most of these codes are international building codes. They're not things we can excuse ourselves from that are driving this. I think there's probably room in some small places, but I would say it's marginal or negligible compared to what we are required to do. Again, much beyond what the city's imposing.
Okay,
thank you so much. So for the remaining, maybe we'll just do our top two and then go around and then we'll come back for thirdsies. Okay, thank you. Rob?
Oh, just two, Taisha? Okay.
I saw those hotlines, so I feel like a lot of people got questions answered.
They did. That's fair. Okay, I'm gonna make I guess kind of a suggestion. We have Fire Station 6 in Gun Barrel. It's literally a softball throw away from Boulder Rural Fire Station, which could house another crew there. I'm not going to get into the politics of Local 900 and Local 4415.
So is your question, have they considered consolidating fire stations with other different
Yes, that's going to be my question.
Okay.
Have you, because I mean, there's some redundancy in Gun Barrel. Is that a consideration?
I'm happy to take this, Michelle, and unless I've got something wrong in it. But I will say I so appreciate your question, Councilmember Kaplan. I think consolidation in general is something we've been considering across the city. In fact, it's one of the main reasons we're heading up to a new campus soon, because it's just more cost effective to have us there. I will say that the topic of that particular fire station has come up from both unions and leadership in different ways. It is an ongoing conversation and no decisions have been made. But certainly the conversation has sprung up.
Okay, that's good to hear. My second question, I'm going to try to consolidate a whole bunch. I know that we're going to get a report in May that is using the tool that calculates all these different scenarios. will that tool have scenarios for other consolidation options like police, fire, police in a rec center? And will we get numbers from the replacement costs of the 11 buildings and the savings from the 13 lease buildings and data like that?
So we are using that model that I know was discussed in the council memo and some have seen. And so it's one tool of many. It doesn't really do everything. It is helping us balance, again, some really large capital needs over time, looking at some of those big trade-offs. So I think some of the short answer is no, it's not going to have all those different data points that you're referring to for May in that calculus. We're really focused at the moment on these priority buildings. What we're really looking to bring forward in May are strategies and different kind of options to think about. If they're maybe not necessarily very specific capital projects, but they will consider opportunities to consolidate. They will consider different kinds of opportunities to phase things because we know we may have to break some of these big building costs down over time. So those are the types of things that we'll be looking at bringing back in May.
Okay, I've hit my question limit.
Oh no, Kara got 3, so I'm feeling a thing of fairness. Go ahead, hit the other one. Everybody gets 3.
Awesome, thank you. I just want on the public safety building with police and dispatch in it, I wasn't clear. I know in Mark's hotline, we're not going to rebuild it there and we're going to build it on the eastern campus, but do we own that land?
We own the land in the eastern campus. Yes, that is very much.
No, I'm sorry. The land where it currently is now off of.
We do own that land as well, and that's a part of our consideration. Is it's part of our real estate portfolio, and so we'll consider how that could be a tool. How we could leverage that potentially.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Tina. Oh wait, yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just have a couple questions. And the first is for the disposal of property, are we going to try and more aggressively pursue that as a timeline, or is it based on market conditions? When could we expect that to begin happening?
So again, every property is unique. Some of them are pretty kind of I'll say free of other ideas. And so I think as soon as we can look at some of them, we do want to bring them forward as we look at after we consolidate, after we move staff out. Some other properties like those, particularly on the East Bookend, are part of some other considerations of how we move forward. So those may, are more within those conversations. But if certain properties, we're, I think, hoping to start looking at those as soon as they're vacated. And I would say we would want to look at market conditions at that time, to see if there's a particular positioning. But
okay. And then my other question is, our fire and public safety services are used extensively with CU as well. And how do we get CU to be involved as a financial partner with some of these projects? Is that something that we're actively doing?
I may look and see if others have any kind of comments. In our facilities department, we've not necessarily engaged with CU to look at that, but I think that's something that we can consider as we look at, again, our goal is to look at all of our financial levers, and I think we can take that back and look at that.
Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Mark?
I've got to make one quick comment before I ask my questions. At the beginning of this presentation, the city manager said that a number of comments that had been received by her almost appeared to be personal in nature with regards to staff. That's not correct. They were, in fact, very personal in nature, and they were very inappropriate. I'd like to remind people that we have a dedicated and highly professional staff in this city, and they do not deserve that kind of commentary. And I would ask people to at least understand that and be a little more courteous in how they characterize the doings of our staff, because they are first rate. Now, in terms of questions, my first question is that how are we supposed to make choices in the absence of an understanding of the levers that are available to us and the funding that's available to us? If you ask us, do we want to choose A or B with respect to the rec centers, everybody is going to choose B. It's like asking a child, would you like to have ice cream or celery sticks? It's not a meaningful question at this point in time. I'd love to see B. Everybody would love to see B. I don't understand how we're supposed to meaningfully make that decision without understanding where the money is coming from. You're talking about over $200 million. And I'd also like to understand how we're going to do this in the context of actually addressing the public safety building, among others, and the need to deal with our firehouses. And I do have a specific question on that. When I campaigned in 25, I ran all over the city saying we have $380 million of unfunded infrastructure liabilities. And today, in conversation with staff, I learned that our $500 million of liabilities, of which 100 is funded, applies only to the 15 buildings. So how did the landscape change so dramatically in a year, where $380 million would have cured all of our ills, and now $400 million would only go towards the 15 buildings? Can someone address that for me?
Yes, I'm going to start with, I think, your first question. These are great questions. I think was the first question about decisions and choices. And so first, we are not asking for decisions tonight. We are not asking for choices. We want to bring some of those back. So we share the exact same sentiments. We would love to build everything. That would be really great and fun. We know that we have limited funding. And so we're in a position to try to weigh kind of all these things also. And we acknowledge we have to understand what our funding envelope is, like what is possible. And so that is exactly what our next step is, now that we have started to look at the funding that is available currently and what these potential ballot measures could generate, is to take some of these priorities and these buildings and look at what could be possible. What we're really asking for tonight is not any choices, but just looking if there is feedback from council on how we may prioritize. Do you have feedback? Because the options, there's tons of options and there's a lot of ways to look at this. And so, one, we want to present to you the situation and what we have in front of us. And really just look for if you have additional feedback and priorities as we take that next step, because we couldn't agree more. That is exactly what we need to do, is look at what's available and how do we mix this.
I guess my last question.
Actually, I'm sorry, before you go on, Mark, I have a point of order.
Okay.
On your comment, Michelle, about giving direction. So we got some guidance on straw polling, and there was a specific comment around not relitigating when we give staff direction during a straw poll. And I just would love to get some clarification on if we give direction and then there's research, then does that block us out of other things that we didn't necessarily give guidance or direction on this time? And is this an appropriate point of order?
I think it is.
Evening, Council. I'm Deputy City Attorney Chris Reynolds. I'm standing in for Teresa Tate tonight. So as Michelle said, we're not looking for any decisions this evening. And to your question, Councilmember,
speaking, exactly. Can you talk to that, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And to your question, Councilmember Adams, because there are no decisions made, it's not about relitigating a decision in terms of direction. And so there's nothing to prevent, individual council members from sharing their perspectives on what direction that they think that the city should go in on these issues. And so
we don't have to worry about that.
Right. Yes, that's
Okay.
That's basically what I'm saying. Thank you.
I just wanted to, because I saw that relitigation thing in that, and I wanted to get that real clear. All right.
Well, I'm going to litigate for the first time. One last question.
You also had a question I have not answered on unfunded liability.
I would like you to answer that then.
Yeah, would love to. It's a great question, council member. So I would love to provide some insight into that. So there's what we're sharing. There's two different things, and I appreciate how confusing this can be. Unfunded liability is really a calculation of the number of things in a building that have not been replaced. That's really what we're looking at. And so, like, for instance, when we do an asset review of a building, it will say we need a new heating system, a new cooling system, upgrades to paint, those sorts of things. Those represent unfunded liabilities. What it does not account for is the modernization that we just talked about. It doesn't account for new codes. It doesn't account for improvements or upgrades with ADA. So in many of our buildings, they're really far from meeting any kind of current ADA standards. And in many cases, particularly with ADA, the kind of clearances that are required really involve having to build additions or to build new spaces to accommodate those. So the unfunded liability across our entire building portfolio is really, it's the infrastructure failures. What we've presented in the 400 million is more of the new building that we should be building. And so they're different in that way. The 20 million that we're talking about making minimum infrastructure investments is probably a much closer parallel to what really is resetting unfunded liability. That's taking care of the unfunded liabilities in our buildings. The 400 million are the new buildings that would meet modern codes. And that's the difference.
And then I actually have two last questions, but they're short. The first one is the 20 million that we're going to be spending over the next few years. Is that not just kicking the can down the road? I mean, when is it that we will begin to actually do work to actually improve whatever choice we make with respect to rec centers or other buildings? When do we actually get into the work? Because that $20 million could be very valuable if we were able to start working tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we can't. And so are we just kicking the can down the road for 5 or 6 years and hoping God will provide?
Again, it's a great question. I think there's a nuance. We're not really kicking the can. These buildings are not fully operational. And if we continue to not invest today, we're losing systems. And so I might say we kicked the can many years ago. And that's the challenge we're in today, is that it takes 5 years. If you approved a project today, it would take us 5 years to move into that project. That's just the timeline of going through design and permitting and construction. And in many cases, I mean, the past 3 weeks, we have been, I could state numerous cases where we have had systems fail. We've had to go in, we don't have hot water. We had our own staff locked in an elevator. So these are the things to actually keep those buildings running. We want to limit those investments because we really hope that we are bringing forward projects that can advance quickly so we can limit what we're calling sunk costs in some cases. But they're not really kicking the can, they're keeping us operating.
And hand to God, this is my last question.
Is this your third question or is this your fourth?
Councilmember, if I can just add a little bit further.
You can.
Thank you so much.
Well, Mark thinks about
what I would say. What I would say too is perhaps for today, what we're really looking for, other than whether or not you have concerns or you agree with, like, there's some major renovations we need to prioritize first, is really about our approach to, there is a need to fund the mix of buildings, and that's what we will be coming to with how do we stack those in May and some possible scenarios. But if for some reason council as a collective body did not feel that our approach to saying, yes, there are many needs across the city, we understand the magnitude of them, but we think actually these are the ones that we want to fund. We need to hear that too. So those are that's the kind of input that, at least today, and then that we're looking for. While depending on that or based on that input, in May, we will certainly be sharing with you, based on that, the mix and match of possible scenarios with existing funding, with potential funding that we could get from additional sources.
Okay, thank you.
Feeling good about that. Remember, there's going to be another round of questions.
Last question, I promise. One of the key elements of this entire conversation is what these projects will cost. At what point do we dig into these projects to value engineer them, to see if the cost is actually the cost that's on paper, what we can do to reduce the cost? I mean, we obviously need funding, but we also have to do that in the context of what projects cost. Is it absolutely required that a public safety building be $120 million? Is it absolutely required that every fire station is going to be $10 million? What are we doing to try to squeeze every dollar out of these projects so that we have a better capability of actually seeing them realized, at least in our lifetime, or your lifetime? You guys are all younger. You don't want to use my lifetime as the standard here.
It's a great question, and to fully acknowledge these are, so first, the numbers that we're presenting they're rough orders. They are based on us looking at industry standards, our own current examples of cost per square foot, and they're based on really square footage needs. They have not dove detailed into the buildings because we haven't been approved to advance these projects. And that really is, when you get into a project, to refine costs. For instance, the public safety building, the reason, one of the the big drivers of the price tag is the size of a new public safety building that we need. We have done program analysis the past few years ago that suggests we need a building at around 100,000 square feet. That is a building over $100 million in today's cost per square foot. And so I think absolutely we want to get into these projects and look for opportunities to kind of bring costs down, but they're also just reflective of what our current market conditions are to construct these kinds of buildings. And they are on cost per square foot. I just want to, then the fire stations, it's a great question as well. I don't think we're in these numbers necessarily suggesting we're replacing every fire station with a new fire station. I think this is where we're looking for blends. We're looking at what the goals are and the needs of our fire department, and how do we renovate some of these buildings in more limited ways. So I think what you're talking about is trying to really bring some of these into some better cost constraints is exactly what we want to do. Currently, none of them are actual projects for us to really dig into. So what we're bringing to you is a rough order, but it is based very much in industry standards, square footages that we're used to using. And so it gives a pretty rough order of the costs.
Thank you.
And Matt's been waiting very, very patiently, and I turn it over to him.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have two young kids, so patiently waiting is the name of the game. Appreciate the questions that have come before. They've been helpful, but they also maybe raise new questions on top of that. Let me first start with Fire Station 4. I start there because that's my neighborhood fire station off Darley and Broadway there. It's the epitome of a single family home. That is a tiny one there. I recall when we were talking about CU South related stuff that there was a conversation about response times, population at CU South, and whether or not Station 4 would maybe have to shift to the east a little bit to stay within the framework of those response time requirements and accreditations. And I'm just sort of curious, do we have certainty that that won't happen? And therefore, please, let's build a new one. My only concern is, are we building something really new where there's still a decent chance that we would have to move it to maintain those standards. So maybe I misunderstood, but I do remember there was a conversation about 4 in that sense, or CU contributing to a new fire station out on theirs to, again, maintain that envelope of response time. So I just want to ask that question. It pertains to 4. Maybe the chief is around to answer that question, but that was something I recall in our CU South conversations.
Yeah, I would defer. I do know those conversations. I certainly would defer to some others who may know more about the details of those conversations. But what I can say is when we have evaluated properties in Station 2 as well, we work directly with fire, and they're the ones who set up the polygons that essentially look at the call volume and look at the best positioning of the stations and where they serve the people. And so every time we evaluated a property, which frankly is rare when they come up in that area of town, it's kind of hard to find properties. So we're constrained there. It took us, I think, close to 10 years to find a property for Station 3. Just because the way they come up and how they meet those polygon standards. That whole assessment was done and did kind of underlie our purchase of the new property for Station 4. So it was assessed and analyzed.
And that was existing polygons or with a future context of the population and density that CU South would bring?
I think, Chris, you may have some more to add to that, so I might.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. And Chris Meschuk, Deputy City Manager. Matt, that the dynamic model that Michelle was describing that we built allowed us to model essentially 5 years of call volume and then model if we move a station, what happens. And it's an interconnected system. So if you move one station, it changes the call volume on another station. And you're correct that in the annexation agreement for CU South, we had a clause in there, a paragraph in there about public safety. We have since done that more dynamic analysis. And what that analysis actually showed is close to where Station 4 is now is actually an ideal location for response times, which is why then we were fortunate enough to snag a property that is, literally next door and across the street for us to be able to do that. So still on our mind, and obviously will still be something as other growth and development happens in the city. But right now, the analysis was pretty solid on that area.
That's all I wanted to hear, that it included CU South and it dynamically responded to that population shift, and yet still the location was picked based on those new pieces. That's exactly awesome. So thank you for addressing that question head on. Appreciate that, Chris. Next question is really kind of a follow-up to, and I'm sort of logically trying to work through how we make sense of this. And this has to do with the renovation versus new build. And I totally get the need to protect embodied carbon. I know our former council colleague, Lauren Folkerts, was a major champion of sticking with wanting to maintain that embodied carbon and being thoughtful about that. In fact, she's taught me what I know about that. So I totally get that. What I'm struggling with is then the immense cost when we're not going to tear down, like, say, East Boulder Rec Center because of the embodied carbon. So we're in an additive state, and that comes with tremendous cost. But we've already committed to fully rebuilding the South Boulder Rec Center no matter what. And in which case, if we're doing that, doesn't it mean it's most cost effective to add more of the infrastructure at a more cost effective basis than it would be to add it at East at a major premium because you're not rebuilding it? So I'm trying to understand how that works, because the numbers just don't seem to add up to me. So anyway, I just want to end there because I'm trying to understand how those things actually make sense.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a complicated equation. One thing I just want to be clear, it's not necessarily tremendously added cost. And every building is very different. So some buildings, particularly ones that do have a complicated form and roofs that have intricate structural systems, that's going to be way more costly to renovate a building like that versus a building that has a regular shape, a rectangular form, and a regular structural system. So it is a little case by case. And that is where, in the case of East Boulder Community Center, when we looked at that building, we said, geez, that building has a regular form. It's got two rectangular wings that come out. And so adding structure and adding to that building can make sense because you are adding to a regular form. It has flat roofs. Like the way you can add on can minimize those costs of putting an addition on. And so it's a little bit of apples and oranges from one building to the next necessarily. There is an incremental cost. But I would not say that it's enormous. It's not like it's double the cost. It's less than 5% in that kind of range to reuse a building versus building new. And again, every building's a little different, so that calculus is different. But that was a big driver in looking at East Boulder. In addition to the fact that we're looking at 55,000 square feet worth of a structure, and the fact that we don't have to tear down a lot. We don't have to do a lot. We might have to add a little bit on and we have to reconfigure within versus another building where we actually have to tear down a lot. We have to do a lot of demo before we're adding back. And so that's a bit of the nuance that goes into that calculus. So I wouldn't say that there's a huge incremental cost at East Boulder to make that renovation.
Well, okay, I hear that. I just look at the price tag and what's proposed to change versus what a new facility brings, and to me that seems like anyway that seems quite substantially different.
The square footages are definitely something to look at in there because a lot of times that's the biggest drivers. We're looking at two really different square footages.
Okay, I appreciate that. My last question, because I know we're going to do three, centers on. It's not one of the critical projects, but it's important because it could feed in here. We have some existing projects that are in the pipeline that are outside of this 15 critical. Are we looking at reevaluating phasing or whether or not they're truly needs versus wants? Because we are starved for resources at this point to handle the critical. And I'm wondering if we, and being on council, I own some of the decisions that have been made there. So I take some of this responsibility. Have we looked at peeling back some of those existing projects? And one in particular that I think is, I'll just use an example, is like the civic area. I get the East Bookend and thinking about year-round farmers market, but the rest of that project isn't necessarily, I don't deem it as a need, probably a want. And so can we peel back some of that resource and reapply it to some of these more critical needs? Again, the needs versus wants calculus. And so I'm wondering if there's ways for us to look back and really figure out where that opportunity is to peel some resources back to really put them where they're maybe most effective given our constrained financial environment.
Hey folks, I'll just talk briefly about the civic area. That the same round of CCRS projects in 2021 that included funding for East included the civic area. And we advanced that project for a lot of reasons. You've already mentioned the one around the opportunity to leverage the East Bookend. It is one of the parks in the worst condition in our system. It has aging infrastructure, dated irrigation that leads to all kinds of challenges and issues, responsive maintenance, and isn't designed in a way that is supporting downtown vitality in a way that it could, in the way that we see downtown park investments do. And so really that project has been advanced due to its condition, due to the opportunity to leverage and support investment with the East Bookend, but really because of what downtown parks can do for economic vitality at a time when we really need that. This is the largest swath of land in downtown Boulder. It's a key connector between the Pearl Street and the Hill, where we're going to have a lot of people going back and forth. And we are overly reliant on sales tax. And so it is a way to drive revenue that can help fund some of these other projects.
I appreciate that, Alan. Thank you. We'll circle back to those conversations, I'm sure, on the 18th as well, or in May. Appreciate it. Well, those are my questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Any more questions from those who have not already posed one before I ask mine, which are, I feel like y'all did a lot of mine, so I don't really have to have a whole bunch here. So, all right, seeing no other hands, let me just double check on mine. At what point, I remember, I think it might have been last year when we were doing budgets, I was asking about what is the criteria or formula for us to, as a council, to consider using reserves. And I just ask that because there are certain things that to me are urgent and important. And others to my colleague's point could potentially be pushed back. And then again, I would also be remiss if I didn't bring up the current thing. So I was just curious about just in the research and work that you've done, were there any conversations around tapping into reserves for any of the urgent and important priority ones?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Charlotte Husky, Budget Officer. The city has a reserve policy of 16.7% across our operating funds, 20% for the general fund. It's important to note that our reserve policy really focuses on considering emergencies and natural disasters. We have those reserves in place to help to support if there are natural disasters that occur, such as floods and wildfires. And so really when we're talking about tapping into reserves, our reserve policy focuses on those particular areas in lieu of funding one-time capital infrastructure projects or ongoing needs.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all my questions at this time. All right, any other round two questions? Seeing no hands, going to move us to question number 2. Does council agree with staff's recommendation to prioritize investing in minor infrastructure, major maintenance needs first with currently available funds? Rob, then Mark.
Thank you, Taisha. I just feel like I need more data to be able to answer this question. I know there's a life cycle cost analysis for these buildings. I just feel like I want more information on debt service projections, a chart showing the proceeds from the disposal of the 11 properties, the lease savings from consolidating the Western campus, and the avoided deferred costs on the retired assets. I kind of feel like I'm making a decision in the dark, to be quite honest. I don't feel like I have enough information to agree on the proposed next steps to further develop. I mean, I do agree with a mix of scenarios, but in that scenario, I just need a lot more data. And like, if we can't capture what we're going to get from the disposal of 11 buildings or the savings from the 13 lease buildings, and then combine that with our debt service. I mean, I remember it was 100 million for the bonding against the general fund. That debt service was 800 million a year. What is our debt service on the CCRS? 73 million. Just all of these little factors. If we could have, I mean, I keep hoping this tool is something amazing that will give us these answers in a clear form so that me personally, so that I can make that decision for you.
And council member, just a clarification, is that in response to that just the major maintenance needs, or is that a sort of a combination of the mix and the major maintenance, right? Because
it's a combination of all of it. Because I feel like I want to see the whole picture so that I can kind of drill down into the priority maintenance picture and the 20-year.
Thanks. That's helpful clarity. And Michelle, maybe I don't know how you feel about it, but there is no matter what we figure out with the rest of the funding, there is an immediate major maintenance need, and maybe that's something you can speak to.
Yeah, I think that's why, thank you, Nuria. And just to help provide that clarity, why we've separated these two things so distinctly. I think all of your points around trying to make these major capital decisions and what's next and what the tools could be is important. And that's where we also need to go and layer in a lot of these revenue sources and how that could help fund major capital projects and what our next steps are. The minimum maintenance needs that we're identifying are just known imminent failures and imminent risks in buildings. And so I think that's where we're looking for support in being able to really keep buildings operational. We're putting Band-Aids on things right now where we need to replace the heating system. In the very near term, the projects that we're identifying in these major capital projects, like I said, if we had all the money tomorrow, they would still take 5 years at best to hit the ground. This is truly keeping our existing buildings operating today. So just to make that distinction, that's really what we're coming forward requesting is money to keep our current buildings open and operating.
Okay, I mean, if it's that simple of a question, then yes, I of course I agree with that.
Thank you. Mark?
Share my colleague's concern with wanting to see the whole picture, and it's not going to change my support for putting the Band-Aids on, since we have to put the Band-Aids on. I don't think we have a real choice in the matter, and no, we're not going to be breaking ground on a new rec center in the next year. So yes, I'm going to support the request, but I am also going to say I support my colleagues' desire to get the whole picture as quickly as possible so we can actually understand better what it is we're doing and when we're doing it and how we're doing it.
Thank you, Mark. Nicole?
To me, yes, feels like the only option that we really have here, unless I'm misunderstanding the situation. The alternative to this is that critical buildings experience critical failures that cost a lot more money, or at best create massive disruptions to critical programs and services. The plastic lined evidence in the public safety building, that was pretty wild to see. None of us are municipal finance experts or facilities experts, so I feel comfortable not getting into the operations on this. Also, we do field a lot of questions from community, and so to Mark and Rob's points, I think if there is some information that you can give us that can help us explain this to community a little bit, that may also help, because I think some of these questions are out there in community as well, right? Well, why spend money on failing buildings? And it's like, yeah, but we also don't have new buildings yet to take the place of these and keep maintaining those programs and services. So if there's any information you could provide us, I think it would be helpful in communicating. Sorry, that was sort of a tangential answer as well, but yes, it's my answer.
Thank you, Nicole. Ryan?
Yes to 2, and I'll just say yes to 3 while I'm on. I was quiet with the questions because I had the benefit of conversation with the team this morning, and I'm on the long-term financial strategy committee, so I've had maybe more time than others to understand and internalize a lot of this. And I just wanted to say, well, 2 things. One, I'm optimistic and hopeful that we will be able to provide for all of the needs with the rec centers, with the fire and public safety centers, and so on. But if I could just then add to that to say, there's sort of I'm going to question 3, if that's okay. I'll just say it and be done. Where we are now is at an opportunity to really take stock of a kind of a change in strategy with all of this. And so, we have now an asset management program for the whole portfolio. I mean, I guess in 2021 really it started, but this is pretty new. We're hearing from staff about making these projections with preventative maintenance in mind, with thoughtfulness about the whole lifetime cost. And if I have any concern, well, I would say my biggest concern is that we have a really important job to do here to shift into a position of greater financial sustainability. And I think my greatest concern is that if we do it in sort of cuts and pieces at a time, we're going to have decision fatigue from the community if we do some of it this year and some of it next year, and so on. So what I would love to see as we look at these investment scenarios is the whole thing, the 400 million plus the rest of it, to describe our entire shortfall together. The community can come together with it, and let's focus on this whole denominator that we need to achieve, wrestle with it at that level, and then let's get the whole balance of it done. And I'll just close by saying I know that's what staff has been so involved with over these last couple of years, to really calculate a super complex problem that's just landed with them from years of deferred work. And they know it, and so now the hard part is to get it to council so that we can know it and then help the community understand it. And I'm really grateful for their work, and I would agree with what Mark said earlier, that they're just doing a stand-up job, both the financial group and the Parks and Rec group, and I'm really grateful for your service.
Awesome, thank you. So I will go ahead and answer. Sorry, are there other council members? I don't see any other additional hands for question number 2 around the minimum infrastructure. Any other comments or moving forward with that? Tara, you're on mute.
Yeah, for those of us that want to say yes, can we just say yes to that question?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Thank you. Aaron. Good, thank you. And Tina. Thank you. All right. And I'm a yes on that too. Now we're on to question number 3, which is, does council agree with the staff's proposal for next steps to further develop a mix of investment scenarios based on the priority buildings, including the rec center? And then there's not another number here, so I'm assuming that this last little piece here is also a part of question 3, which we're gonna have a conversation about questioning. But based on the feedback of these questions, specific questions, specific next steps will be considered for the ballot measure, the budget development for 2027, and the 6-year CIP. Just wanted to add that little piece there. So we are now on our last question with 34 more minutes in our allocated time. No pressure. Who would like to go first? Oh, wow. Are we all? Oh, okay, here we go. There we go. Come on, get in there. All right, Matt.
I was waiting for others to chime in first. Good question. So yeah, kind of a mix there. You're right. There seems like there's a pseudo fourth one there. Yeah, whatever. It's all good. I see your adaption. I like it. All right. So with regards to next steps, yes, but I think there's some reprioritization that needs to occur, and so I just want to flag that for staff. I think you need to be prepared for there to, perhaps, at least for me, I don't know about my colleagues, to be offering some reprioritization of some of these objects. I'll just throw one out. I think it's totally reasonable, just given the way it's been evaluated and given the 5-year time horizon. If we started now to have something, and as Mark pointed out, we're maybe kicking the can with this sort of imminent maintenance. I think it's fair for us to consider that we redo the cadence for the rec centers where we do East Boulder Rec Center, because there's already existing contracts. I get that. I may have issues with what we're spending on, but maybe that train's left the station. I think we then go to South Boulder Rec Center as the immediate next one. So we start that process. If it's going to take indeed 5 years, we have to start the clock as soon as possible. Otherwise, we run the risk of even more expensive fixes down the road. And then I think you go to North Boulder as the third. So I'm just going to lay that out there. So it's no big surprise when we get there to the 18th. And I do think we need to discuss that civic area and really think about needs versus wants at that core level. And I think that's a real kind of policy decision. Again, owning that I was part of that decision that made that put the community or the civic center under par, but we did so in isolation. And I get that we're no longer talking about projects in isolation anymore. So that's a great evolution there. So those are the things that I would flag just going forward. But I do think the next 2 things would be the grant bonding against the general fund, and certainly where the DDA fits in. I know that's a long-term revenue generator, but if it's long-term, maybe that's a payback option on the money we're investing in the civic area redesign. So some of that money out of the general fund, or from CCRS, I should say, funnels into other projects. So I think there's some clever ways in which we have newfound capabilities, and I'd like to see us explore those permutations to the fullest extent. so we can actually best advocate to community about the benefits that those various potential ballot measures may have. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. Tina.
All right. Thanks so much for all the information. And I'm just reminding myself and staff, correct me, we're not making any decisions about what amenities are being offered at any rec center at this point, correct? Okay, great. Just want to clear that up. I just also want to note that this is an inherited issue, and I appreciate that we're now looking holistically at this portfolio for a long-term predictable schedule of maintenance and refreshing and sometimes renewal renovation. As you know, I was on the school board for 8 years, and they have a very clear and disciplined approach, which is largely based on bonds, which are pretty big. But it's a really good approach, I think, to learn from. But I think it looks like we're on the right track. One thing to think about if we do continue to ask for funds from the community, and if we create this more robust approach toward our facility maintenance, is to think about something like the CBAC, which is a committee for the school district that helps just create community input into just the facility conversation. I felt that it created a lot of trust in the community as because we are spending so many tax dollars to have that voice. And Parks and Rec did a really nice job with this in this perspective, but it might be interesting to think about a facilities board. I hesitate to say that because I don't really support more boards and commissions in general, but that connection between facility maintenance and the community I found to be incredibly valuable on school board. The other piece is I'd love to at some point adopt a policy around leases of public buildings so that there's equity around the expectations and who is chosen to use those buildings. I think it's been appropriately opportunistic, but we might want to think of something that's a little bit more lasting and predictable as well. So if that comes up, I'd love to talk about that. The other piece is making sure that our disposal policy is clear and transparent in the public as we go down this path. And just make it clear that the community understands how we're going to be selling or transferring properties to other public entities if that comes up. Whatever it is, I think I want to be clear with the community. The other thing is just finally is I like this idea of looking at the investment strategies. There was a sentence that talked also about what budget trade-offs might play into these solutions as well. So I do encourage staff, as difficult it is going to be in this, what I assume is going to be a terrible budget year again, to think hard about, are there budget trade-offs that we need to know about right now that we're making, and how do we talk about that with the community? Because it's very unlikely through the general budget and through this facility budget that will meet everybody's needs. And the sooner we can be clear about that with the community, I think the better. But overall, I think we're doing great, and thanks to Pratt for all their work on this too.
Awesome. Thank you. Nicole.
Thanks. I almost forgot to raise my hand. Thank you, Steph. This is just such extraordinary work. Really, in 5 years, including the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, you have brought all this together. So thank you. Just a couple of reflections related to this question about the investment scenarios. There's so much changing right now, not just in our city, in our country, in our world. I get the sense that community is really change weary. And that feels like part of why this conversation is making people really nervous right now. I'm curious, as we're considering scenarios, what would the community need to invest and how over the next 20 years to prioritize these facilities at a level that meets all of our goals and framework, and also keeps what people are hoping to have in these spaces? And just to get a sense of what would this cost to do this at the level that I'm at least hearing from community right now, that we really do want all these things to kind of stay as they are. What would that cost us? Because it may be that we can, maybe people are change weary enough and have funds to invest that we might be willing to get there. And if not, at least we'll know that. I think it would be really helpful as the scenarios kind of come back. And yes, I do. Please go forth and bring us some scenarios, because this is a really hard question to think about. What I would love to have is a matrix that shows not just life cycle costs, but some of these other goals, equity, climate goals, recent governance frameworks we've adopted, like alignment with those frameworks, like the facilities plan, the Parks and Rec strategic plan. If we were to grade these different scenarios that you're going to bring back to us on those pre-existing goals and frameworks, how do they come out? Sort of like you did for the buildings with the red and the green and the grays. Could we have something like that as you bring these scenarios back, in terms of alignment with existing governance frameworks and pre-existing policies and plans? And to the point about people being change weary right now in community, I think it might be good to include some other scoring criteria that aren't necessarily within those frameworks. Things like preserving existing services in their current locations, maintaining historical program patterns, responding to neighborhood level expectations for citywide amenities, those kinds of things. Just so that that can be part of the decision matrix too, because I hear that in some of our questions that are coming out, that it may be that those are things that will weigh into the decision making, and it won't just be our pre-existing frameworks. Hopefully that all made sense, but thank you. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the scenarios. I think that will help a lot in terms of getting concrete and in understanding how this all fits together in a bigger system. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Tara.
I want to agree with Tina that the Parks and Rec Advisory Board did an amazing job. By the way, Parks and Rec Board, I listened to your entire last week's discussion, study session, and it was really, really helpful and very informative. So thanks for all your extra work that you've been doing on this. And that also includes Allie and the park staff and just everybody here tonight and everybody that's been working on this. I do want to say that my questions earlier were about saving money, and that is because I want the community to see that we are trying to save money. Okay. We have tightening our belt, I believe, is very important to the community right now. Once we start asking for more money from them, they're going to say, well, what have you done? So I'm hoping that in our next few conversations, we can say, this is what we have done, this is what we plan to do, and not convince, but just show where we are working hard to keep the community trust and even increase it, and also to save money. So that's why I did ask those questions at the beginning. I'm not trying to micromanage, but I'm saying a lot of community members speak to us. They spoke to me. They said, I know about this, and we're spending too much money on that. So how can we show all that we're doing and we're going to do to move this conversation along?
Thank you, Tara. Aaron.
Yeah, thanks everyone for all your very hard work on this very difficult subject and very complicated subject. And I really appreciate the effort people have put into answering all the questions. I had to budget about 45 minutes just to read the answers to the hotlines. Imagine how long it took to answer all of those questions. So appreciate all of your work here. And I do support the approach for the next steps. So I look forward to seeing the scenarios that you bring back. My colleagues have said some great things so far. I want to echo the thanks to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board for their recommendations. I thought those were good recommendations. They did reflect the community's desire to see no loss in major services, right? And we've heard that loud and clear, that people would like for us to have at least as many recreational services as we have currently, which of course is no surprise. But as Ryan said, I'm hopeful and optimistic that we'll find paths forward to provide those services. I do want to continue with our current projects that we're working on, like that first phase of the renovation for East Boulder Rec and the downtown civic area. I know we're not prioritizing specific projects. I'm just reinforcing that I think that we're working on good projects currently and look forward to seeing those continue. So it'll be good to see the next steps. I will say, if we can continue to look for those slightly cheaper ways to get any of this done if there are value engineering opportunities or creative solutions to some of these problems that cost a little bit less for some of the things that Tara said. I know that folks would certainly appreciate that, and then we might get a little bit closer to realizing these goals. And then I'll just come back by circling back to what Mark said, which is that there have been some really personal attacks on staff members through this process. And I want to say that I just think those are inappropriate and uncalled for. I know everybody here is working very hard for the good of the community, and so really appreciate what you all are doing. That's what I got. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Excuse me. Echoing many of the comments made by previous council members, but wanted to emphasize the consolidation. I especially appreciated Rob's comments about the fire stations and somebody else brought up the CU as well. But just based on the level of the collaborative nature of emergency and disaster response, it seems like there could be some deeper work in sharing the burden of the cost of some of those facilities related to that. I also really appreciated what Tina shared around the licensing, and this is to me just more of a prioritization, especially since Michelle, your comments about the 5-year time frames, kind of what can be done in service of in that amount of time frame. And I did want to circle back to my comments while I'm in the lease conversation that all the lessees are not the same. And so although I appreciate the idea of of some kind of criteria or standard leasing agreements, I do want to be mindful of, for example, the pottery lab, right? Where we know that our arts are having a hard time with and nonprofits in doing our buildings. So, and if we say we want to do that, then maybe there needs to be some exceptions or considerations, and I would be open to that. As far as some of the elephants in the room are what I'm calling facilities adjacent. And so that would be the airport conversation and Area 3. Matt, I love you brought up wants versus needs, so I'm excited about that conversation. And then for the budget, just really making sure that right now the majority of the KPIs or outcomes that are a part of that project are primarily output based, and so getting some more outcome data would be very helpful, and also just change over time. Oftentimes we only get one snapshot or two, but it would really be helpful to have some more change over time when it comes to the data, to the budget conversation. And then lastly, one thing that we haven't been exploring, and I'm hopeful maybe I'm not on the long-term financial planning strategy group, but if there's any enterprise opportunities there, obviously we have one being our water utility, but I'm curious if there's conversations around developing solar or something that will, I feel like we're leaning very hard on sales tax, and although I appreciate, Ali, your comments and expertise on the importance of having a thriving downtown park, I think going back to the poly crisis, this is not business as usual, and I just have some significant concerns around our ability to primarily focus only on increasing sales tax. I know that there's that mix, but I would be very open to thinking differently about how our city brings in revenue beyond ballot measures and sales tax, and especially with enterprises, and reclaiming and expanding potentially our science and tech footprint in an entirely different way that we hadn't considered. And that's the big thinking. I wish we could bring some big thinking into this conversation, like we did with the arts conversation. What we've always done and tinkering around on the bits there is to Mark's comment, kicking the can. And so I'm hopeful that that investment group is also thinking differently about the way that our city brings in money. And that's all that I have to say about that. Thank you so much. Anything else for the good of the order?
I'll just,
Maria.
if I may, thank you. I wanted to thank all the council for this conversation. It has been a hard conversation, and I know that you're facing a lot of questions in community. I think we've got what we needed to move forward in terms of bringing some of those scenarios. You will see some more specifics on what could be. I also want to acknowledge that staff has also been on a journey in the past few years, just because of our financial constraints, on looking and realigning and seeing where there could be savings. For those in the community that may not recall, last year we called for a 5% reduction. We went down for the first time in many, many years to about 28% of our total costs across all funds being personnel, which is a fairly low number in municipal governments. And we are this year, as I've kicked off budget, are asking staff in anticipation of a variety of things, including a conversation about compensation as we enter into union negotiations, have asked staff to consider additional cuts, right? These are complex problems that are multi-layered and that our funds do a variety of things, not just buildings, but programs and personnel. And to the conversation about what are the trade-offs, there are multitudes, right, as we think about it. And this conversation about where facilities has been for many, many years, Parks and Recs have been in their department plan on the old version of how we tiered things. You're okay where you are, just continue being fiscally constrained. We're no longer doing this, and we're bringing a holistic portfolio. And I just want to recognize for you and to community that it is because of this change of bringing everything together. It seems daunting and it seems big. And that is the only way that we know to really think about this in a comprehensive manner. So I just want to finally thank you for being with us on this journey as we're tackling a huge problem. And we're trying to face it with integrity and with thoughtfulness of what can we done, because there's a lot of things we can do. It's just now about timing and strategy, and your feedback has been really instrumental in that. So we will talk more about potential scenarios in May, but just appreciate this really hard conversation we've been having.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been a wonderful study session, and I look forward to seeing all of your beautiful faces next week. Mayor, you just came off mute. Did I miss something?
Oh, just thanks,
Okay,
Taisha.
good. I was like, uh-oh.
Good night, everybody.
Because I was looking at the wrong script, apparently. So, alas, take it all in. Prioritizing facts over feelings, and that's kind of where we are right now. And so I just really appreciate all of the information, qualitative, quantitative experience to get us to this point. And it's not going to be perfection, but it will be progress. So just thank you. This is our team. This is what we have, and it's more than a lot of other places have right now. So also be mindful and be grateful of this team. Be grateful of the excellence and the people that we get to work with. And you may not love everybody or like everybody, but everybody comes with unique gifts and skills and talents, and this is the time for that to shine. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I'll see you again soon. Ciao for now.